Conclave. Once again, for those of you who are not in the know, our theme this year, we are in our 20th edition, and it is, by all means, the India moment. May I please ask you all to settle down? Do settle down. The niceties, the hellos this morning, save it for after the session. We are ready to get into our first session, and let me introduce you, ladies and gentlemen, to our opening session on day 2 of the India Today Conclave, Global GPS, War, Markets, Power Shifts, and India's New Voice in the World. This session is brought to you by Radhiko Khaitan. To take it from here and to introduce you to our speaker this morning, I want to hand it over to our sessions moderator, Rahul Kanwar, News Director, TVTN, and Managing Editor, Special Online Projects, Executive Director, Business Today.
Hello and welcome. In diplomatic circles, the success of a summit is often defined for the success of its G20 presidency. But this is also at a time when the world is engulfed in a massive geopolitical crisis. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine makes it very difficult to get G20 countries to agree on a common language and framework. In many ways, this is a diplomatic nightmare. If this was cricket, think of it as having to bat on the pitch of Indore. The ball is turning so much that every batsman is having to struggle. Our special guest this morning is considered by many as the finest diplomatic mind in India of his generation. But he's batted up on a nightmare of a G20 pitch. How does he intend to bat, and what kind of strokes does he intend to hit? Ladies and gentlemen, at the India Today Conclave, join me in welcoming to the 20th year of the Conclave, India's super sharp Foreign Minister, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar. Can we have a warm round of applause, please? Dr. Jaishankar, I want to start by asking you about how the Russia-Ukraine conflict seems to be posing the biggest challenge to India's presidency as the G20. How are you trying to overcome this global geopolitical conflict, which seems to be tearing apart any plan you may have to show the G20 and India's presidency as a massive success? How are you batting on this dangerous pitch?
First of all, Rahul, let me say it's a great pleasure to be back. At Indore, first you got to manage the curator, okay, to make sure that you don't have that much turn in the pitch that early. I think we did a decent job in 2 meetings so far, the finance ministers meeting and the foreign ministers meeting. How do we manage? To me, it's not just a question of managing the big geopolitical divide right now. It's a question of getting the G20 to go back to its original mandate. The G20 was invented to look at global development, to look at global growth, to address challenges to it. And what we saw last year was that that entire agenda got sidetracked by the Ukraine conflict and the debates that accompanied it. It was a particular concern for us because the consequences of the Ukraine conflict have actually aggravated what is already a very distressed global situation. You had the COVID, you had even pre-COVID, you had issues of debt which were increasing. So the energy spike, the food shortages, the fertilizer problems, these are actually big concerns of much of the world. But when you looked at the G20 for the last year, these concerns were peripheral. That you could say understandably, the focus was entirely on the Ukraine conflict. So our first effort is really to get the G20 refocused on what it should be, its mandate. I think we succeeded in large measure in both the meetings which have issued documents so far. We were able to get a very, very substantial agreement. For example, in the foreign ministers one, there were 24 paragraphs, and many of these global concerns, health, debt, finance, even terrorism, counter-narcotics, all these we had agreement on. What we did not have agreement was on the issue of whether the Bali consensus, which was forged last November, in which we had a role as well, whether the Bali consensus could be rolled over for this year. And here the Russians and the Chinese took a view that they would not agree to that. So what we did was we actually produced a hybrid document, you could say, which was a chairman's summary for those two paragraphs and an outcome for the rest of the document.
But your opponents in politics and quite a few diplomats have highlighted the absence of a joint communique, saying that oftentimes the success of a summit is determined by the outcome which is laid out in the joint communique. Given that you didn't have one in the finance ministers meeting and then in the foreign affairs meeting, your opponents will have their swords out saying Jaishankar has failed, India has failed, that nothing really came out of this G20 presidency except a chairman summary. How do you view this?
Chairman summary and an outcome document. That's what it's called.
How do you view this concern around because the same challenge could potentially persist to September, which is when G20 heads of state come to India for the leader summit?
Look, opponents will have the swords out no matter what, especially in our current state of politics. But if you look at it in a more informed basis, which opponents rarely do look at the Indonesian presidency. They actually went through a series of chairman summary till the very end, where finally with our collective efforts, we were able to get a Bali declaration. So if you're asking me how am I doing with respect to that, I've actually got a chairman summary and an outcome document. I've got out of a document of 24 paragraphs, I've got agreement on 22. So I would say in the given circumstance, I'm frankly doing as well as anybody can do. Now, you have people, you see, unfortunately, or you could say this is part of being in opposition. You can take positions which have no sense of realism, no sense of responsibility, as though a very serious conflict requires a diplomatic event in Delhi to be breached. There's a much bigger problem going on in Ukraine. The problem is not going to be sorted out in a conference in Delhi. The problem is going to be sorted out out there on, in Ukraine. So I think it's a non-serious proposition you're making.
What are you hoping, Foreign Minister, would be India's legacy from this G20 presidency? There's a lot of commentary in the West about how seriously India is taking this G20 presidency. What are you hoping will be the lasting imprint?
Look, you are wanting me to predict not just a match, but a whole series ahead of time.
That's right.
I honestly cannot say where we would be in September. Obviously, I would be optimistic. I would try my best. If I were to look at what is already visible, we were the first country who actually consulted much of the world that is not on the table at the G20 about their expectations of the G20. Nobody else has done this. So what Prime Minister Modi did through the Voice of Global Summit Global South Summit. We actually asked 125 countries, saying, look, what is it you want? What is it you feel which is not getting through? What should we be doing on your behalf? Nobody else has done that exercise. So today, actually, much of the world says, we have India there batting for us, that our concerns are going to be on the table, our voice will be heard, and I would say, I would certainly hope one big legacy, and I'm confident of that, would be to make G20 much more true to its global mandate. The G20 should not be a debate, I would say a debating club or an arena only of the global north. That the entirety of global concerns need to be captured. I think we have already made that point very, very forcefully. Now, what else comes out of it? At the moment, people are very, very seriously discussing issues like green financing. They're discussing how do we get the Agenda 2030 back on track. They are looking at issues which, range from terrorism financing, counter-narcotics. So there's a big agenda out there.
There's been some commentary internationally about how India and Prime Minister Modi could have a role to play in trying to work out some kind of a rapprochement or a truce between Russia and Ukraine. In the real world, how feasible is this? Is this something that the Indian government is trying to work towards?
In the real world, you don't predict, and you definitely do not predict publicly. So I won't really give you a more specific response on that, but I do want you to note something. At this time, there are very concrete, I would say, specific issues which have arisen from the Ukraine conflict. Wherever there's a possibility for us to contribute, we have tried to do so. I'll give you two examples. When we were at Bali, the Turkish foreign minister actually brought up with me the problems they were having at that time with Russia on the Black Sea grain corridor. And he felt that my speaking to Lavrov would be very helpful. And I did. Okay, it may have made a 1%, 2%, 5% difference, I don't know. But in some way, we could help. When I was in Ukraine, at that time, when I was in New York, the Ukrainian Prime Minister actually met me and had some concerns about the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. And he wanted certain issues to be conveyed to the Russians. So I got PM's okay to do that, and then went and, did that with Lavrov. And then there were some consequent issues that we brought up with IAEA, with the Director General Grossi. So wherever we can help, we will. Now, whether the time is ripe for something bigger, is there actually the possibility, are the parties willing to look at returning to the negotiating table? Because at the end of the day, that is what is essential. That, I think, is still a very open question.
Now, this is a year where potentially President Xi Jinping could be coming to India twice over, once for the SCO summit in mid-June, then potentially in September. I want your thoughts, Foreign Minister, on India's most important relationship with the neighbor across the Himalayas. What's your reading of the current state of play with China, given the continuing confrontation in the Depsang and Demchok sectors of the line of actual control?
This is a very, I would say, challenging and abnormal phase in our ties with China. Why I say that is because from 1988, when Rajiv Gandhi went there, till 2020, the understanding was that peace and tranquility on the border would be maintained. We had two agreements not to bring large forces to the border. It was a very specific set of understandings. There were even protocols on what happens when army patrols meet each other, etc. Now, in 2020, the Chinese violated that. and they violated that, and the consequences of that we saw in Galwan and in other areas as well. Now, we have deployed our troops, we have stood our ground, and the situation, to my mind, still remains very fragile because there are places where our deployments are very close up, and in military assessment, actually, therefore, quite dangerous. Now, we have made substantial progress when it comes to disengagement in many areas. There are still some areas where we have ongoing discussions. So they will, it's a painstaking job, we will do that. Now, we have made it very clear to the Chinese that we cannot have a breach of peace and tranquility. You can't violate agreements and then want the rest of the relationship to continue as though nothing happened. That's just not tenable. So my most recent encounter in this regard was with the new foreign minister, Qin Gang, in fact, when the foreign ministers' G20 meeting took place. And we had a long discussion about it. In September 2020, Wang Yi and I had an in-principle agreement how we're going to resolve it. So the Chinese have to deliver on what was agreed to. And they have struggled with that.
Why?
Well, that's a question you need to ask them. I can't answer it, because for me it's very clear-cut. Until these problems are sorted out, we will not return to a normal relationship. I want to make that very, very clear.
Your opponents say that you're not being totally honest about the extent of incursion, that areas where the Indian Army used to patrol previously have been denied, landmass in excess of 1,000 square kilometers being spoken of. They're saying this is a daylight robbery of our land. The PLA has intruded into our country. Dr. Jaishankar is not telling the people the truth.
These are the same opponents who said, let's leave the border undeveloped so that the Chinese can't come, or if they come in, they can't come in so fast. These are the same opponents? Okay. Now, let's look at the reality. Look, the reality is wherever an attempt has been made to change the status quo, the Indian Army has deployed and countered. Now, it is because of that there has been face-offs and standoffs, and on some occasions clashes and loss of lives. If we had done nothing, then Galwan wouldn't have happened. Then, what you saw in December at Yangtze in Arunachal wouldn't have happened. So, the fact that, there have been counter deployments is not disputed by anybody unless you are an opponent. Okay? So, in terms of what is it you are patrolling, yes, there are certain places where we have is something which Rajnath Ji, the defense minister, has spoken about in Parliament, that you have mutually agreed areas of temporary non-patrolling in order to facilitate disengagement. So if there are places I cannot patrol, there are places the Chinese also cannot patrol. Now, so this is something which has been worked out in certain areas where the deployments were very, very close up. But do remember also, this is quite different from what used to happen before. Because if you looked at our history, people forget in Barahoti in the 1950s, in 1958, we unilaterally decided on a demilitarized zone. They didn't reciprocate. In the 1970s, there are areas we chose not to patrol, unilaterally. Even when Sumdurongchu, Wangdung was resolved, we first came down. This government is very different. There's nothing unilateral. If we have today taken on some I would say, commitment, that commitment is matched by an equal commitment based on the principle of equal and mutual security on the Chinese side. So, look, opponents will play this game because the very people who actually neglected the border, the border infrastructure budget till 2014 was below 4,000 crores. Today it's almost 15,000 crores. You look at road building. The pace of road building has doubled or tripled. Tunneling has tripled. So the people who are today making a noise are people, and you should look at the record.
Speaking of opponents...
No, hang on.
Oh, yes.
In 2013, I was ambassador in China, okay? You remember I think I spoke to you at that time, there was a Chinese incursion in Depsang. Do you remember what the foreign minister of the day said then? He said, this is acne on the face of a beautiful relationship, and therefore we should not worry about it. So now you're telling me these people have suddenly discovered what's the importance of the border? Come on.
Speaking of opponents, Rahul Gandhi, speaking in West London, the United Kingdom, said that you are scared of China, that the foreign minister says China is much more powerful than us, how can I pick a fight with them? At the heart of his ideology is cowardice, and then he goes back to the times of the British to say that the RSS never fought, and this is really the mentality that's seeped down. How do you respond to Mr. Gandhi?
Okay. I'm actually reminded, because first we are talking about Rahul Gandhi speaking about China abroad. I'm reminded of a very different experience I had in 2011. This was the first time I met Narendra Modi. He was then the opposition chief minister of Gujarat, very much under attack at that time, political attack in India. He comes to China. I'm the ambassador. And he asked me for a briefing on our problems with China, and we're having a problem. We had the staple visa issue, we had the Northern Command issue, there were a whole set of issues. So I told him that you're the first chief minister who's ever asked for a national security briefing. I'm curious to know why. To which he said, look, I'm an opposition chief minister. I have come to China. I do not want to say anything which is 1 millimeter other than my national position. And I have to be very careful. So I first need to fully understand from you. And two, at the meeting, if you see me deviating in any way, you signal me. I'm reminded of this because when I saw what happened in 2011 and I see what's happening today, I look at that contrast. Okay. Now your question. Look, I also, like many others, followed some of what Rahul Gandhi said when he was in UK. Obviously, look, a lot of it is politics. I'm putting that aside. Okay, there's a discount when it comes to politics. I am troubled as a citizen of India. I'm troubled as a citizen of India when I see somebody drooling over China and being dismissive about India. And I'll give you examples. He puts his description suo motu of China in that Cambridge talk. You know what's the word which comes to his mind when he talks of China? Harmony. His one-word description of China is harmony. His one-word description of India is discord. Okay. He talks admiringly of how China is the greatest manufacturer, nobody can. And yes, China has done a tremendous job. Nobody. But when it comes to manufacturing in India, he runs it down in every possible way. He says, make in India won't work. When you made Covaxin, the Congress party was saying Covaxin doesn't work. So, it's one, look, you can have objective assessments about the progress of other countries. There's nothing wrong with that. But in this current situation, to talk up, a competitive relationship and to worse, do down your own country. You're telling me I'm scared. I'm asking you, why is somebody undermining national morale like this? And it's not just, economy. Let's even look at security. He talks about connectivity. He speaks admiringly in the same talk. He's spoken about the Belt and Road. he compares, very poetically I must say, he compares Belt and Road like the yellow river in China gushing forth. Guys, the Belt and Road goes through POK. It violates our national integrity and sovereignty. He doesn't have a word to say about it. So I think, when, to use Dr. Pillsbury's term, when panda huggers try to be China hawks, it doesn't fly.
Interesting. Now that you've mentioned Michael Pillsbury, I want to refer to a few things from his book. If you heard some parts of his session at the India Today Conclave yesterday, he spoke of how he would have expected, given what's happened in the warring states in the past, that there be a much stronger response from countries like the Quad to develop a countervailing force to a rising superpower. That the Quad is still very loosely formed, doesn't have any definition in terms of a strategic military alliance, even if it's not a formal alliance, but a more robust opposition to a rising superpower, that the world is allowing China to rise without coming together to stop it more purposefully.
I watched that session. It was a very interesting session. But pause for a moment on Quad, and I want to take you back to the previous question. Today, I heard from your words, opponents, how we should stand up to China. Do you remember that first time we tried the Quad was in 2007? And do you remember what happened to that Quad? And how much we stood up to China at that point of time? So what's the difference? Today you have a Quad because this government has frankly, the guts to stand up on Quad. 2007 we didn't, we buckled. So, coming to Quad, I would say, this is not about statements because, does somebody explicitly mention a country or not. It's not, it shouldn't really be seen through the prism of treaties and alliances. To my mind, that's old thinking. This is a different world. And we are not a country, for reasons of our history, who do that. Treaties and alliances is part very much of a post-Second World War, Cold War kind of framework. Today, I think the global situation calls for countries with converging interests who have a great deal of comfort with each other, working together in an area or a domain which they find themselves comfortable. In the case of Quad, that happens to be primarily the Indo-Pacific. And then developing, what are called habits of cooperation. And I think if you see, from the time the Quad was revived, because 2007, the Quad was kind of aborted, it took a decade for it to be revived. 2017, it started as at the Foreign Secretary's level. I happened to be Foreign Secretary at that time. 19, it became Foreign Minister's level. I happened to be Foreign Minister at that time too. And 21, it met at the Prime Minister President's level. Today, the fact that it meets, the agenda is growing. Each meeting is actually broadening the areas of cooperation. So I feel it is moving well, precisely because it is flexible, it is nimble, it is creative, it gets top-up attention. What I would not like to see is, I would not like to see it becoming bureaucratic, rigid, where it becomes legalistic. People spend more time quarreling about, does this conform to that article or not? That's not the way we are thinking at all.
I'm also very curious, and can I have a mic sent across to Dr. Pillsbury, please, about his theory that China is winning the 100-year marathon and that it won't take till 2049 for President Xi to take China to being the preeminent superpower of the world, that Dr. Pillsbury thinks this could happen in the mid-2030s, and that this is the new reality of a China-led world order. As Foreign Minister of India, Dr. Jaishankar, what do you think of this?
I heard him. I also had the pleasure of spending some time with him this morning. You know, definitely, in the case of China, I mean, no question, China is today the number 2 power in terms of its size, in terms of its ability. Yes, there are sectoral areas where it may be even better than that, and I think he gave some examples of it yesterday. I look perhaps in a more detached, objective way. You know, he's an American looking at China. He's a China specialist looking at China. And you know, we've known each other for 40 years. I have great respect and regard for his understanding and his experience with China. I am today an Indian looking at the world. I'm looking at both US and China and a lot of other factors, together. I don't think, it's a binary situation. I don't think the world anymore can be analyzed in terms of a binary competition. I accept that, that these are, looking at them, that US is still number 1 and China today, you could say in many ways, follows thereafter. But I think the situation is much more complex. There are many more variables. I am, as a student of history, I'm quite reserved in my judgments about the future, where they go, how they happen. And I come back actually to the theme of your meeting today, the India moment. Because, and I would actually, rather than moment, say the moment is the batsman has just taken the crease or just a little while ago. I think there's a full innings to be played. That innings is called Amrit Kal. It's a 25-year innings which is to be played. I think we have today set ourselves up. We have set ourselves up not just by foreign policy moves, because you have to do the deep domestic changes which are necessary for the rise of a power. China did that. Had our opponents done what they should have done during that tenure, we would be in a very different position. We don't have the deep industrial strengths, the deep technology strengths of China, because that kind of thinking was never there. If you look from, leave alone the 1970s and 80s, which were a disaster economically. You look even after the 1990s, where was the focus on building deep strengths? Instead we went for globalization mantras. So my point is, my takeaway from what he said, and from his books and from our many conversations from him, countries have to build deep strengths if they have to have global aspirations. Today, Make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, the kind of things we are doing, even improving human resources, skills, educations, nutrition, all this is part of a metrics.
Dr. Pillsbury, you spoke of China's rise to the top of the world by the middle of the next decade. Dr. Jaishankar, Prime Minister Modi, and the Indian government are working towards what they call Amrit Kal, the rise of India to the top. How do you square these two things off, given the fact that you're estimating China will rise, and many like Morgan Stanley are thinking that India is witnessing a once-in-a-generation rise in global power? Dr. Pillsbury.
I would say that the world is watching the India moment. The Indian political leadership has within its hands the chance to be sure that the world is not ruled by a dominant number 1 China. In many ways, it's up to India to decide what to do. And it's very scary, if I could use that word, to see Rahul Gandhi's comments about China. We have a few people in America who think the way Rahul Gandhi apparently thinks about China, that harmony is the key feature of that country. Almost all those people, the old panda huggers, they have changed their minds. They have come alive. They realize there's a global challenge from China. And if you carefully read Dr. Jaishankar's book, The India Way, you will see in there his proposal that India should play a shaping role in the global order, partly as a voice for the global South, but for other reasons as well. The reaction in China to Dr. Jaishankar's book is very negative. They don't like the idea that India could play a role speaking for the global South. They believe that's China's responsibility. So this challenge for the future of the India-China relationship, that's something I wish I had devoted more time to many years ago. But I now see India as the world's chance to be sure that China does not become a dominant, aggressive, and dictatorial society.
That's interesting. I also see we have a bit of a mutual admiration club here. Dr. Pillsbury, when he came yesterday, carried Dr. Jaishankar's book, The India Way. And I just heard from Dr. Jaishankar before we started this session that in the last several years, he's probably gifted more copies of your book than anybody else. So you got a good representative here because he wants people to read what you're writing. In fact, the very interesting thing, and I want to refer to some parts of The India Way.
We need to give both the books to Rahul Gandhi.
Now, the very interesting thing about The India Way, and I refer to this just for those who haven't had the opportunity to read Dr. Jaishankar's book, is that you have a theorist, you have a strategic affairs expert who's also shaping India's foreign policy. And so much of what I grew up reading, and so many other people would have read Western thought or Chinese thought, but you're not really linking back the strategic acumen from the Arthashastra, the Mahabharata, Ramayana, and bringing it to an Indian doctrine, an Indian strategic way of thinking, which is what Dr. Jaishankar tries to do. So, and it's also a great opportunity to engage and debate and challenge you to some questions about balance of power. In the US, elsewhere, Russia, Beijing, there's a lot of thought on balance of power. And national security doctrines are well documented, public documents which can be debated and discussed. In India, it stays largely within cupboards in South Bloc. It's not public. I want your assessment, Dr. Jaishankar, about India's comprehensive national power at this moment and your projection of the climb. If you were to rank countries, where do you think India stands at this moment in terms of its comprehensive national power? Where do you see it by the end of this decade?
You know, first of all, I just want to pick up a little bit on what you were saying, which is to develop our own, draw on our own traditions, you know, develop our own narratives, arguments, etc. Because when you speak about comprehensive national power, I mean, in a sense, there are a certain set of metrics that we take, and I think nobody would dispute the fact that there are many areas, many domains where we have fallen short. We could have done very much better over many years. And I see today, you know, this country, I say, I mean, not necessarily this government, doesn't have to be a political party. This entire country actually today making that effort. You know, as someone who travels around, you know, for me, it's a very small change, but a very important change I see. When you go to many educational institutions today in India, I go as a minister, they would normally say, this is the gold medalist of our university. Today, they actually say, you know, these 4 people, they are patent holders from our institution. These 5 people, you know, they have inventions they would like to show you. So this country, this society is changing, the younger generation even more so. And we are getting very, very global, much faster than people think. So I am finding, you know, before I came in here, your social media person asked me saying, you know, you are very visible on the social media. It's not because the foreign minister is doing something different alone. It's also because the society has changed and is relating and interacting with that in a very different way. Your question, where do we go? Look, I am absolutely, I think
you stand at this moment. Let's start from there, in your estimate.
We stand fairly high because if you take the totality, comprehensive national power is a kind of a net assessment of our capabilities. But I would say that if we do need today to develop the technologies, to develop the industrial capabilities, it angers me when I hear talk that, we are a services economy, because that's a cop-out. So when I see, something like, say, a 5G deployment of Indian technology, when we see, to speak about an India stack, when we look at a invented in India vaccine, to me, these are the bellwethers of change. This is what will actually grow our comprehensive national power. When, again, in defense, it's a domain you're very familiar with. When we are stressing make in India in defense, we are ourselves discovering there's so much more that we actually were capable of producing. It's just that there was no policy, there was no pressure on us to produce. It was much easier to get it from outside. So, look, this decade for sure, it's a general expectation in the world that we would end up as the third most powerful nation by the end of the decade. That's the general global consensus. But as I said, I'm thinking an era. Not I'm thinking an era, I think the country is thinking an era. That we are looking at a 25-year time frame. It's the first time, in fact, in this country that people are saying, let's think 25 years ahead. Let us plan for 25 years ahead. A lot of things we are doing today, you will not see the results even in 5 years or maybe 10 years. You will see it beyond that.
Given the fact that Russia and China are getting closer, we saw China play a role recently in trying to broker an agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Is it inevitable, you think, that the world will be split into two camps? India will have to choose, most likely being with the United States? Or do you see India as a third pole in a world dominated by the United States and China?
I think we will see not just third poles, we will see multiple poles. We will see multiple poles, and when it comes to India-Russia, I put it to you that it is actually a uniquely stable relationship. If you were to say 1955, I take as the first inflection point. From the time when Russia committed, Soviet Union then committed itself on a very core issue of India's national security. Russia has been through tremendous ups and downs over this period. We have our growth has been more organic and relatively uninterrupted. But through all of this, India-Russia relations have remained extraordinarily stable, and I put it to you, there is a deeper underlying convergence, a geopolitical convergence. No question, as a result of the Ukraine conflict, Russia will turn more towards Asia. Okay, I have no problem with that. But I would also suggest to you that when Russia turns more towards Asia, one part of that, a big part of that, will actually be visible in India-Russia relations, and that is already visible actually in trade. That our trade, in fact, has probably more than tripled in the last year, and it's not just oil. There are a lot of other things as well.
Will President Xi be coming to India?
Look, I'm the foreign minister. This is something you should ask his chief of protocol.
What's your sense? You would know.
No. I don't do programming. Or if I do programming, I do of my prime minister.
I have a question. I'm not sure of what he's going to say, but it's really a question that needs to be asked. And this is really about whether you think that the SCO summit in mid-year and the G20 summit provides an opportunity to push through disengagement along the line of actual control where we haven't been able to achieve disengagement. Thinking, just zooming out and thinking for a moment, it's very difficult for President Xi to come to India at a time when you're so publicly and openly saying that there is a massive problem along the line of actual control. Our relationship isn't normal. Do you think that creates an opportunity to ensure that there is some kind of a true pullback?
Let's not mix apples and oranges here. Disengagement is primarily a military diplomatic process. It has to be so because it involves actually sitting with maps, looking at the topography. local military commanders discussing their dispositions and why that is so, and what it would mean if I pull back so much and you pull back so much. It's a very, very granular set of conversations that need to be had. It's a conversation which only, you know, what has been happening over the last 2 years is basically either for us a corps commander level or one below that, the military commanders with the diplomatic representatives, you know, in our case from the MEA, they sit and work this out. Don't confuse this with summits and visits. That's a different issue. But there is a larger issue, and the larger issue is this, that if the current state of affairs continues, relationships between us will not be normal. That is a reality.
You know,
and I think that reality is not lost on other people.
Saying this as openly and clearly as you are is really interesting and refreshing to see. I want to draw your attention to the new American ambassador who's been announced and confirmed, Eric Garcetti, and I want to quote to you what he said about the Citizenship Amendment Act. He was asked during the Senate Foreign Affairs Relations Committee meeting about the CA. Now, he's someone who's spoken up multiple times on human rights and discrimination, and he thinks the Citizenship Amendment Act is a core piece of his engagement rather than an obligation. He also says he will work because he thinks that this is discriminatory towards Muslims. Now, you will have soon in New Delhi, from arguably our most important strategic partner, a new ambassador who thinks a key legislation, which is core of your ideological agenda, is discriminatory towards Muslims.
You know, first of all, when CA was passed, there was a debate. People in this country tried to make it an international debate. And it was, it was interesting when I went around the world and I explained to different countries that please look at your citizenship criteria and tell me, are you less specific in terms of how you have defined the criteria than we have? Take the United States. There are two very well-known amendments there, something called the Lautenberg Amendment and the Specter Amendment, which actually single out specific communities and specific faiths and give them a faster pathway into citizenship. Not just those. I can cite to you in US, there's a Jackson-Vanik Amendment. You know, there was one, if my memory serves me right, for the Hmong people. So, and this is not just the US. But if you look at Europe, you know, the Germans have a faster citizenship pathway for people of German descent in other countries. There are other European countries who say, you speak my language, you have my faith, you have cultural characteristics.
But India doesn't have one faith.
No, sorry?
India doesn't have one faith.
Sure.
But therefore the question is about him thinking of this being discriminatory towards Muslims.
No, the point is that in many cases, the people who are persecuted have nowhere else to go except to India. I mean, if you are a Hindu in Pakistan who's being oppressed, where else will you go other than India?
Okay.
So, I mean, look, somewhere, I mean, you should not subject common sense to political correctness. I mean, there is a certain reality here which all of us know. I mean, stares you in the face. But your question, what happens when he comes here? Let him come here. प्यार से समझा देंगे.
प्यार से समझा देंगे नए American ambassador को. So we're out of time. Ordinarily, a few years ago, if I was doing this session at the conclave, we would have spent a lot of time talking about Pakistan. We've come to the end of the session. We've not even mentioned the P word. Given what's happening in Pakistan at this moment, Foreign Minister, what's your reading of our relationship with our neighbor on the West?
Well, I think our relationship has not fundamentally changed. Today, our relationship is at a low ebb because they have not yet demonstrated a willingness to give up on cross-border terrorism as a primary way of dealing with India. So I think as they move away from that, one has to look at the possibilities.
You know, it's been very refreshing to have Foreign Minister Jaishankar explain his point of view and India's point of view, or the India way, going back to Indian scriptures and Indian streams of thought, as opposed to referring just very casually and easily to Western thought or even Chinese thought. And this, I think, is something which really needs to be worked on. Can we have a very warm round of applause as we thank the Foreign Minister for joining us? Eric Garcetti or anybody in the US Embassy, if you're watching, प्यार से समझा देंगे. That's the takeaway from the session. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Absolute pleasure having you with us. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Dr. Jaishankar. May I please request the Minister to stay on stage for just about 30 seconds while I call upon Mr. Amar Sinha, CEO Radico, to come up on stage and present a very small token of our appreciation to the Foreign Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, raise a warm applause, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Thank you, Minister. All right, once again, to get all of you up to speed, this evening, once again, we will reiterate, if you're coming in, do carry your identity card. It doesn't or cannot be your credit card. It has to be an identity, either your Aadhaar, driving license or passport, because you will need that kind of identification to enter this hall, because our keynote speaker, as you all know, is the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. All right, viewers, let's, ladies and gentlemen, get into our next session this morning. Justice for all, the endeavor and the gap. To take it from here, I'd like to call on stage my colleague Gaurav Sawant, Managing Editor, Strategic Affairs and Defense.
Namaskar. Yato dharm stato jay. Where there is justice, there is victory. This is the ancient Indian philosophy from the times of the Mahabharata. This, ladies and gentlemen, is also the motto of the Honorable Supreme Court of India. Yato dharm stato jay. But in today's India, where you have close to 5 crore cases pending in various courts, 87% in lower courts, some more than half a century old. Are we following that principle of Yato Dharm Stato Jay? With me is the Honorable Union Minister for Law and Justice, Kiran Rijiju. He occupies that chair that was once occupied by Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. And I want to begin by asking you, Minister, are we today living by that principle of Yato Dharm Stato Jay with these many pending cases?
Thank you very much. Absolutely, we are following the same path, and that is our ultimate goal also. And there should not be any deviation from the basic objective for which the system has been set up, which is prescribed in the Constitution of India. And as a law minister of this country, I'm absolutely very clear about my duties and obligations, and we are following that dharma.
Sir, when you say we are following that dharma, what we hear is confrontation between the government and the Supreme Court of India on multiple issues. Would you want to tell us more about this confrontation? And it's on multiple issues, sir.
Well, Gaurav, it will not be proper to use this word confrontation. In a democratic setup, there are differences of opinions and positions. Even my position can have a difference of opinion with my other colleague. So between the different organs like judiciary, executive, and the legislature, there will be issues which will run against each other's ideas. But to say that there is a confrontation, that is not correct. And I can tell you, our government from the day one has been absolutely clear in terms of giving space to judiciary, maintaining the independence of judiciary, as well as strengthening the Indian judiciary, which you talk about the large numbers of pending of cases. It is our endeavor to ensure that courts are well equipped. And in different occasions, I can explain in detail how are we getting the courts of India well equipped with the modern technology, with the support of all the system in place. But there are various issues. But right now, I want to stress that there's no confrontation between the judiciary and executive. If there are any perceptible, it's not because of the government.
So that's a big point. So if there is, you're saying it's not confrontation, there are issues. Let's take this one by one, and let's specifically talk about names that the Supreme Court Collegium may send to you. And they may reiterate a name, and yet it's not accepted. Is that a confrontation? Is that an issue?
First of all, let me clarify. It's very important to make the stand and the position very clear. Appointment of judges is not a judicial work. It is purely administrative in nature. If there are names which are sent by the Supreme Court or the High Court Collegium for the appointment as the judges, it is the bounded duty of the government to carry out due diligence. Otherwise, I will be sitting there as a postmaster. Secondly, if you go back to the Constitution itself, the appointment of the judges is the duty of the government. Means the President of India shall appoint the judges of the Supreme Court and High Courts in consultation with the Chief Justice of India and the Chief Justice of the respective High Courts. There is no role of the judiciary as such to initiate and to give the finalization of the appointment of the judges. It was only later, because of the misadventure of the Congress party, the Supreme Court started acting, which is some people described as judicial overreach. And then the collegium system came into existence. But right now, our position is very clear. Collegium system is in place. As long as new system is not introduced, we will follow with the collegium system, but the appointment of the judges cannot be done by the judicial order. It is purely administrative.
Let me then come to one more specific. A certain name is recommended by the collegium. It is sent to the government. The government does not approve it. It's reiterated by the collegium. If this is an issue and not a confrontation, as you insist, Minister, what's the way forward? What's the solution?
See, I don't want to talk about the individual names and why the appointments are not taking place in the case of particular names. It will not be wise also. These are very sensitive matter. And the Supreme Court Collegium knows it very well. I have made my position very clear. Government stands are already known to the Collegium members. And we also know why they are insisting on certain names. But let us not bring into the public domain about appointment of the judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court, because it will not be appropriate. I could have answered it, but I feel that it will not be appropriate to go to the names.
You could have answered it, but you choose not to put some information out in public domain. However, the Supreme Court did. It put out certain information in public domain, including certain intelligence reports. Is that transparency? Is that transgression? Is that a challenge?
We must understand that Supreme Court or any court has its own limitation. They are there to deliver judgment, to deliver justice. They are not like the government, which has all the resources to get informations and make opinion. If government takes a call, it is on the basis of certain informations and inputs. If tomorrow a particular sensitive inputs of the RNW or IB or any other agency is to be put in the public domain, then what is the sanctity of carrying out such a great effort in great secrecy in the interest of the nation? As a name comes to me for Supreme Court judge or High Court judge, there are numerous complaints invariably comes and attached with that name. Do I make it public? No. Right now I have some names with me, and every name has lots of complaints by the colleague judges, by the public, by the association, by the bars. I don't make it public. If a judge has written an adverse comment against any other judge, I am not supposed to make it public. There has to be some probity in the public life, some discipline, some sensible attitude by the people who sit in the responsible positions. So I'm very, very, mindful of my responsibility. I will never, ever divulge all the informations in the public forum which is not going to help for the purpose for which we are sitting there.
So you're saying you have the last word. The government has the last word on appointment.
I'm not saying it. Constitution says so.
Sir, let's then move to another aspect, which is same-sex marriage. Recently, the Supreme Court referred it to a larger bench, a constitution bench. Is that something that is to be decided by the Supreme Court, or legal sanction or law is to be decided by Parliament?
This is a matter, again, I leave it to the wisdom of the people of the country. Who reflects the thinking of the country? It is the Parliament. Parliament is the reflection of people's idea, people's vision, and people's choice. We have the representative people sitting in the Parliament, which covers all the part of the territory of India. Supreme Court has its own authority. We are not supposed to encroach upon each other's territory. But the matter which you talked about, an institution of marriage, how India should govern in terms of taking care of various aspects of the civil actions, requirements, marriages, this has to be debated in the Parliament. And if any law passed by the Parliament is not following the spirit of the Constitution, the Supreme Court has the option to alter that thing or pass a reverse judgment or refer it back to the Parliament. But that too, if it finds that it is not in tune with the spirit of the Constitution of India. Supreme Court is the final arbiter of anything. And under Article 142, they can refer anything and pass a judgment that is law of the land. But when it comes to policy, we have to understand that India is a democracy. A democratic country has its own setup. So it is not only the Minister of Law and Justice who has to give an opinion on this. It is for all the political parties of the country, more than that the people of India will decide how our future should be governed.
Are you then, Minister, saying everybody, executive, legislature, even judiciary, everyone has to be accountable and no one should cross the Lakshman Rekha?
Accountability is one issue. The Lakshman Rekha is another issue. Accountability of judges is something which I am getting lots of feedback, suggestions these days, because judges are not accountable, you know it. Many people have suggested also that along with the National Judicial Appointment Commission, it should be National Judicial Commission to regulate the conduct and the process of how courts are maintained, ruled, or how judges are conducted. So there are various suggestions. I am not going to talk about any particular suggestion or any particular thing, but in general, it's coming to me. We all are accountable. Parliament runs under rules. There are rules of business. assemblies, government functions under rules of business. But in the court, there are no rules. There are practices which are being changed from time to time, and the Chief Justice, as the master of the roster, conducts certain things. As far as the holidays are concerned, judges are going for holidays and all. So these are not exactly decided on the basis of rules framed by the parliament, but these are on the basis of the convention and the practice adopted by the Supreme Court and different high courts. That is why the holidays of different high courts are different from each other. It's not uniform.
You're seeking uniformity there because there is an issue about the number of holidays that the judiciary takes. Is that also a reason why pendency rises to 5 crore amidst talk that government is the biggest litigant? Government should reduce the number of cases government files.
Look, this is a very sensitive thing. Last time there was a question in the parliament. Question was very pointed that why judges are going on holidays and they keep going for holidays every break. I, as a minister, responded to that. But next day in the newspaper, the report carried that law minister said judges should not go for holidays. And there was a heartburn in the judiciary. They said, why law minister wants to stop the holidays of the judges? I did not say it. What I'm saying is, definitely while the court is on vacation, the cases will come to a halt. It's a fact. It's not I'm stating it. Definitely, there can be some regulation, but I am of the opinion that judges require holidays because from the morning to evening, they sit and they deal, 50, 60 cases. And constantly, they are dealing every day. And also, they are performing certain administrative roles. I will come to that administrative part little later. But due to their constant engagement with the judicial work and administrative works, they have a huge mental pressure. They require to release those pressure by going out with family and all for the vacation. Absolutely okay, because you have to understand, in United States or any other democratic countries, the judges deal with 4 or 5 cases at the most in a day. Here, average, a judge deals with 50 to 60 cases. Sometimes I have seen some judges deal with more than 100 cases, especially on the miscellaneous days and all. So after dealing with so much of heavy loads, they definitely require holidays.
Okay, fair enough. One such case that they've also dealt with is the issue of appointment of the election commissioner. They say the Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition, and the Chief Justice of India. What's your take on this? This is now the law, but is this the Lakshman Rekha being transgressed, or is this something that you will do something about, bring a law on this?
First of all, the appointment of the election commission is well prescribed in the constitution. Parliament has to enact a law. Accordingly, the appointment has to be done. I agree that there is no enactment in the parliament for that. There is a vacuum. But remember, the matter came to the Supreme Court not because of the disputes. Some people filed a petition, PIL, and then Supreme Court took a suo motu cognizance of the matter and the constitution bench was constituted. I'm not telling what will be, the repercussion or what government is going to do. But what I'm saying is, I am not criticizing that judgment of the constitution bench. But what I'm saying is, if the Chief Justice of India or judges of India sit on every important appointments, who will carry forward the judiciary work? There are so many administrative matters in our country. So we have to really see that judges are primarily to deliver judicial works. They are there to deliver judicial order, thereby giving justice to the people. If they get into administrative work, then they will have to face the criticism. Suppose you are the Chief Justice or you are a judge. You are part of an administrative process. That will come into question. The matter comes into your own court. Can you deliver judgment on the matter which you are part of? You cannot. the principle of justice itself will be compromised. That is why Lakshman Rekha, what I talked about, is very clear in the Constitution. And I am sure everybody will agree that government, our government, I'm talking about our Modiji's government, we have never taken any action to undermine Indian judiciary, or we have not encroached upon the territory which is under the domain of the Indian judiciary.
Sir, you say the Narendra Modi government has done nothing to undermine the integrity of judiciary. However, it is being said that democracy is under attack, judiciary is under attack, institutions are under attack. Recently at Bhubaneswar, you said that there appears to be a calibrated attack from outside and inside. What do you mean by that, sir?
I think that needs a little elaboration because that is very critical. And not only critical, I feel this is the most important topic for me, for the nation. When I was addressing the conference of the lawyers, the Supreme Court judge and High Court judges were also there, I said in a very clear term, anybody, if Rahul Gandhi or anybody says that Indian judiciary has been hijacked or democracy is over in the country, the judiciary is dead, what does it mean? There is a calibrated effort to undermine Indian judiciary. That is why day in, day out, they are saying that government is trying to take over Indian judiciary. What kind of statements and accusations are these? So in a way, it is a very sinister design. Our judges are not weak. Indian judiciary is not weak. But by constantly telling that judiciary is being hijacked by the government, or government is trying to take over Indian judiciary, that itself is a huge blunder for anybody who makes such statement. And I'm telling you, I got some message from United Kingdom. They are saying that it is very sorry state of affairs that the judiciary has been undermined by the government. And the members of parliament are not allowed to speak in India. They don't know India, but it is the fault of those people who are passing on this misinformation campaign. So, Gaurav, you have to understand that the person who speaks the most, he is saying that he is not allowed to speak. This is most unfortunate in India. जो सबसे ज़्यादा बोलता है, वो बोलता है कि उसको बोलने नहीं दिया जाता है. ये तो हमारे लिए ठीक नहीं है, परिस्थिति ठीक नहीं है.
लेकिन वो बोलते हैं कि जो बोलते हैं वो एक्सपंज हो जाता है. मतलब अगर 40 मिनट या 50 मिनट बोलने भी दिया, एक्सपंज कर दिया.
पार्लियामेंट में तो रूल से बोलेंगे तभी तो आपका रिकॉर्ड में रहेगा. कोई राजा नहीं है जी इस देश में कि पार्लियामेंट में जब चाहे खड़ा करके आप भाषण देगा. सब MP 543 MPs इन द लोकसभा आर इक्वल. नोबडी इज महाराजा देयर. वो चाहेगा कि मैंने देखा है इन 2004 to 9 he used to walk and the whole gang outside, drama all outside, oh our prince is going to speak, and then all clapping and all. Special time and special moments were created for one person. Is this a fiefdom of any individuals? The Indian Parliament is a sovereign authority we have. Nobody has extra territory within the Parliament. Every member is equal.
Fair enough. But tell me this, how is this a calibrated attack on India from outside and inside? When the law minister of the country says it's a very serious comment.
It is not only serious, but it is true. Because the anti-India forces in India and outside India, they use same language. Did you ever notice? Same language. Democracy is in danger. Human rights are non-existent in India. In India, we all know very well in today's time, you can't hide anything. These people, whatever they say, these so-called anti-India gangs, same language is used by Rahul Gandhi. You see, you just compare it. I'm not saying it. You go back from this discussion and you see by yourself. Same language.
He's a senior member of parliament. A senior member of parliament, and you were saying that he speaks the same language as anti-India gang?
Not only the same language, whenever he speaks, that is being propagated and it is being publicized with a louder voice by the same ecosystem. The same ecosystem is working inside India and outside India also. Remember, people of India are with Modi ji and with our government. We will not allow this tukre gang to destroy India's integrity and our sovereignty. Very firm about that.
Sir, as Law Minister of India, you're saying that there is a tukre gang. Yes. And an opposition MP is in sync with this so-called tukre gang, as you're saying?
Because I am not going to divulge so many other things. How fundings are being, done from outside. How they are being organized. Who are the people who organize events in London or elsewhere? Recently, there was one seminar. I was not aware of the seminar in Delhi. Some retired Supreme Court judges, some senior lawyers, some people were there. The topic of the seminar was accountability in judges' appointment. But the discussion whole day was how government is taking over the Indian judiciary. Remember, I have excellent relationship with the Chief Justice of India, the present one, the past one, all the Supreme Court judges. I have a fantastic working relationship with all the Chief Justices of the High Courts and other senior judges. There's no problem. It is a few of the retired judges, few, maybe 3 or 4. Few of those activists, part of that anti-India gang. These people are trying to make Indian judiciary play a role of opposition party. Some people even go to the court and say that, please rein in the government. Please change the policy of this government. These people want Indian judiciary to play the roles of opposition party, which cannot happen. Judiciary is neutral. Judges are not part of any group or political affiliations. How can these people openly say that Indian judiciary must take head-on with the government? What kind of propaganda is this?
Sir, if there is a violation of the law, you, the Law Minister of India, Narendra Modi government has been in power for 9 years. What action, if any, is being taken against those you describe as tukre gang?
Actions will be taken, actions are being taken as per law. But if I say that I will take action, the agencies will take action as per the provisions of the law. Nobody will escape. Don't worry, nobody will escape. Those who have worked against the country will have to pay a price for that.
But you will engage with the opposition. And while we are on this topic, now 9 years of your government being in power, there were 3 main issues that the BJP stood for. The Maryada Purushottam Shri Ram Mandir at Ayodhya, Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir, and the Uniform Civil Code. Are you moving forward in that direction with the first 2 having been completed?
Well, you are aware of our ideology, our manifesto, and what we are doing. About the Uniform Civil Code, 2 of our states have already constituted committee, and it's a work in progress. The parliament session is going on. I'm not going to talk about our position, but you are aware of our objective, our ideology, and our stand. I think that's enough.
लेकिन अगर यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड के ही इसी मुद्दे पर, क्योंकि कुछ राज्यों ने तो ऐसे कर ही दिया है, क्या 2024 के चुनावों से पहले आप इस दिशा में आगे बढ़ेंगे?
वही मैंने कह रहा हूँ कि मैं टाइमलाइन अभी बोलेंगे तो सारा जो मैंने अच्छे बातें बताई है वो गायब हो जाएगा. आप इसी को ही डिबेट में लाएगा और सारा देश में ये चर्चा चलेगी. वो मैं नहीं चाहता हूँ. जो महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दे जो मैंने बताया है वो मेरे लिए महत्वपूर्ण है. दूसरे बात आप पूछा नहीं, मैं एक नोट लेके आया. मैं सोच रहा था शायद आप पूछेंगे. मेरे लिए बहुत ज़रूरी है इसलिए बताना क्योंकि आज इंडिया टुडे का कॉन्क्लेव है और ये बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट प्लेटफॉर्म है. कुछ चीज़ें होते हैं बाकी चीज़ों से बड़ा होता है. These are vitals. I was amazed and more than that aghast when a member of parliament stands in the house inside and outside and says that every state in India must be free to do whatever they choose to do. India is just a union of states. This kind of remarks is very dangerous for India's unity and sovereignty. That is why I thought I must read out this. It's a small, just take 30 seconds. So Article 1, Clause 1 of our Constitution says, India, that is Bharat, shall be union of states. Now, how this gentleman misinterprets this union of states? Now, this Bharat word is used in Mahabharata, Vishnu Puran, and all kind of old texture like Brahma Puran and all. One MP, one member from Tamil Nadu said it, Sri Kullur Subba Rao, during the Constituent Assembly debate. He said, "Sir, I heartily support the name Bharat, which is ancient. The name Bharat is in the Rig Veda. It is said there, oh Indira, all this progeny of Bharata. Also in Vayu Purana, the boundaries of Bharata also are given." Secondly, what Ambedkar said, I'm just skipping other long points. Ambedkar, while making the final, presenting the draft resolution in the House, said, "But I can tell you why the drafting committee used it," means the Union of States term. The drafting committee wanted to make it clear that though India was to be a federation, the federation was not the result of an agreement by the states to join in a federation. And that the federation not being the result of an agreement, no state has the right to secede from it. The federation is a union because it is indestructible. Though the country and the people may be divided into different states for convenience of administration, the country is one integral whole. Its people, a single people living under a single imperium, derived from a single source. There are many important points I will not add on. So how this gentleman and his same mindset people are saying that India, every state must be allowed to take its own position on important issues. From the ancient time to now, even when the Constitution of India was being framed, it is very clear. The states are divided only for the administrative convenience. And this gentleman and his people are spreading the hatred to divide India from one state to another state. It cannot happen. So when the Britishers left India, they sowed certain seeds, some kind of a division in the society, because they lost India. So here, because somebody has lost the power, does he enjoy right to divide India? This will not happen.
So you are saying that your government will counter all the measures that Rahul Gandhi is saying that democracy is dead or dying here in Parliament and on every platform in the run-up to the next elections? Is that your big platform?
When a person gets into the mode of a frustration, he may utter many things. We are not bothered about what happens to Congress party. If Rahul Gandhi is responsible for the destruction of Congress party, we are not interested in that. But when he makes a statement, when he says something which affects adversely on India's image and prestige, we have to react it. After all, he is a member of parliament and citizen of India. That is why I don't think that we are responding to somebody just like that. We are responding only when it affects our system, our parliament, our constitution, our nation. We are very clear about that. That is why I don't mince the words. We are very simple people and we work for the nation. And finally, I have never stated this thing before. I'm saying today in India Today's Conclave for the first time. When I came from Arunachal Pradesh to Delhi, I was excited, but I was sad. Why? Because when we were there in the border, we just knew about Jai Hind, Bharat Mata Ki Jai. India is our nation, our Tiranga, our tricolor. When I came to India, when I encountered some group of people who are saying that freedom of expression, for anything you can even abuse the nation, these people get protection. We never heard of this kind of thing. So that is why India is able to survive, because there are good people who are ready to sacrifice anything for the sake of India's unity, its sovereignty, despite some gang members hell-bent on destroying India. So I am very clear about that. I come from a very sensitive border state. Prime Minister has given me a responsibility of taking care of a very sensitive department. We are serving the nation. We will continue to serve the nation. While serving the nation, if anybody comes on the way to destroy India's image, India's prestige, we will deal with that also.
Minister, very, very strong words, but spoken from your heart and the 20th India Today Conclave. For joining us here on this platform, thank you very much and wish you all the best in your endeavor, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, raise a warm applause for the Minister. Mr. Rijiju, sir, I'd request you to stay on stage while I call upon Mr. Anuj Kohli, Hitachi Technology, to come up on stage and present a very small token of our appreciation to the Minister. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please raise a warm applause for Kiran Rijiju, Union Minister of Law and Justice. Thank you, Minister. On a side note, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who missed the session with Brad Smith, Vice Chair and President Microsoft yesterday on everything with ChatGPT, AI related, you can catch the session. We are playing it right now at the Shah Jahan Hall. And of course, our next edition of our magazine, India Today, will carry encapsulating all the highlights of what has gone down in the 2 days at the India Today Conclave in its 20th edition. With that, I want to quickly move into our next session this afternoon, setting precedent. Who gets to judge the judges? Arguments and counter-arguments. To take it from here, I'd like to invite on stage our session's moderator, Rajdeep Sardesai, Consulting Editor, India Today Television.
Hello and welcome once again to the India Today Conclave. Few, if any, constitutional posts at the moment in the country carry the weight of public expectations and the microscope of public scrutiny as much as that of the Chief Justice of India and, dare one say, the Supreme Court itself. Not a day passes when the apex court doesn't make the headlines in some form or the other. So how do those who have worn what some might argue is now a crown of thorns see the role of the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice of India in particular? Today we'll be listening to 3 Chief Justices of India, 2 former recent Chief Justices and the current Chief Justice in the course of this day. Please therefore welcome our first guest, Justice S.A. Bobde, Chief Justice of India from November 2019 to April 2021. Justice Bobde, welcome to the India Today Conclave. Am I right in suggesting that the Chief Justice's post today is a crown of thorns, constantly under scrutiny and therefore seemingly under immense pressure as well?
Well, the thorns, if any, are poked by the media.
I see.
It is a difficult place to be in, the Chief Justice of India. But, and it is a heavy responsibility. There's too much competition for the court's ears. And obviously everybody wants to win his case. But I'm saying this frankly, without any disrespect. The problems really arise from the somewhat irresponsible comments judges have to face. And the Chief Justice is always answerable. Anything that happens in the court is the Chief Justice who is responsible.
Now, you seem to be almost suggesting that Bechara Chief Justice.
No, not at
that,
all.
You know,
I was just telling you, just carrying forward your analogy of thorns.
Yes.
I said the post itself, there's no thorns on the post. Those thorns are what you get from the onlookers.
Okay, the onlookers will probably turn around and say that the fact is many judgments in this country at the moment are tangled in political wars. You were, for example, part of the Ayodhya judgment. And the nature of the case, the kind of politics that had swirled around Ayodhya for decades meant inevitably whatever judgment you delivered, there was going to be some kind of a political fallout to it.
That's so in every case.
But is that part of the problem, that because the Supreme Court today increasingly finds itself tangled in taking up these political cases, whether it is Rafale, whether it is the Ayodhya judgment, because these cases come eventually to the Supreme Court, the court almost inevitably and the Chief Justice inevitably finds himself caught in a political battle?
Well, I would like to say that the word label political can be attached to anything. I see nothing political about the Ayodhya case. The case, what we heard. There is probably nothing political about Rafale. It was a defense deal. Ayodhya was an issue about whether Lord Ram, amongst other things, Lord Ram was born in that place, etc., etc., etc. So I don't see, and the case has been going on since, the problem has been going on since pre-independence times. What is political about it except that politicians talk about it? Or some might want to derive political mileage from a controversy. We are not involved in politics as courts. We decide a case that comes up before us, brought to us by parties who have something to say and who have a claim, and we adjudicate that claim. What is politics in it?
So you didn't feel extra pressure while you all were hearing and eventually delivering the judgment in a case like Ayodhya?
No. Possibly a greater sense of, possibly some sense of anxiety on what it might, what effect it might have on the body politics to some extent, but not the political kind.
The reason I'm saying this, sir, is that there is a huge question mark over whether the Supreme Court is truly independent today. And that includes truly independent.
Independent of what?
Independent of executive interference or executive pressures. I quote a senior Supreme Court advocate, Dushyant Dave, he's also headed the Supreme Court Bar Association, said judges are scared of the Modi government and reluctant to rock the boat.
Well, I don't think I should respond to his views. I mean, he's entitled to his views, but I do not see any executive interference in the judicial process. I did not experience any. You could ask, you've invited other colleagues of mine today, you could ask them. You see, the way the executive can interfere is by having benches suitable to it in each case, and that doesn't happen. The benches, the roster is prepared by the Chief Justice of India, independent of any pressures.
But that itself has become contentious over times. You know how four judges staged a few years ago a remarkable press conference, an unprecedented press conference, where they questioned the manner in which allegedly bench fixing might have been taking place.
That press conference, I am not aware of the allegations of bench fixing, though there was something about the preparation of rosters.
Yeah, questioning over the role of the Supreme Court Chief Justice as master of the roster.
That, to my mind, is one of the most unfortunate events in the history of the Supreme Court of India. And I tried my best to see that it doesn't happen. And thereafter, I am saying this because some magazine has already written about my role there. And I did try to bring about a peace between the opposing points of view. I succeeded, party didn't succeed, but it's an unfortunate event. I don't want to, I don't support, I wouldn't have done it myself.
You believe it's an unfortunate, you're saying something important. You believe it's an event that should have never happened. It's an unfortunate event. You don't subscribe to the way it happened. Let me give you examples, since you say you don't want to respond to what an individual advocate's opinion is. Habeas corpus petitions of those who were arrested, for example, in Kashmir, after the setting aside of Article 370. They were kept pending for months. You didn't touch the electoral bonds issue, sir, which again is politically a hot potato. All of this is being interpreted to suggest that the court and the Chief Justice's office unwilling to take on the government. People were for months in jail, sir, under the Public Safety Act in Jammu and Kashmir, habeas corpus petitions filed, and the Supreme Court of India does not see urgency in that matter?
I don't think they were kept pending deliberately as you people see it or anybody else sees it. And one thing I must tell you in this context, I believe, and it is said to be a law of how the human mind works, and that law is that a suspicious person always finds what he's looking for. It is true in the domestic front, it is true in politics, it is true in the executive, it is true in the media, it is true everywhere. You always find what you're looking for.
I'm only giving you a reality, sir.
No,
Hundreds of innocent people possibly were in jail for months. Habeas corpus is the basic right that I have under the Constitution.
First of all, it was during the pandemic.
Yes.
It was during the pandemic. It was difficult to get matters heard. I can tell you, I was not ready for this question. I can tell you hundreds of cases where the courts asked parties, would you like to hear? And parties said, no, we cannot appear. Advocates said they cannot appear. And it happened that there was something about the CAA matters were also pending then.
That's right.
And they wanted those to be heard. Now that involves allowing 500 to 600 advocates to enter the courts. That was not possible. And some of them said, no, we want our matters tagged, we will not get them untagged. But frankly, I would have liked to answer this question with statistics, which I am not ready for.
Okay. You were Chief Justice also, sir, during the contentious, I'll come to COVID later, during the contentious farmer agitation. And you stayed the implementation of farm laws until further orders. Now, traditionally, the Supreme Court, sir, has been very wary of passing interim orders that stay laws passed by Parliament. And yet you did so.
Yes, I did.
Were you aware again that, like it or not, you were stepping into a political minefield? You see, the court seemed to be stepping into a political minefield. The media reacts and then you say, oh, the media is dragging us into...
political minefield. There was a law before us.
Yes.
There was a challenge to a law before us.
Yes.
We were seeking the government's response to the challenge. We were reading stories and watching stories on the television about people attacking each other, forces attacking each other, people jumping onto the Red Fort on the Independence Day, I think. And
Republic Day.
Republic Day. So many violent instances. I had stated to the other side, I stated to the government, why don't you consider doing this? Why don't you consider withholding the laws? Because look at the consequence. There is a law on one side and there is a large-scale violence on the other side. What is important right now? And there was no response. So I consulted my colleagues and we were all of the unanimous opinion that this should be stayed. What's political about it?
Okay.
There were no elections in the offing. And anyway, we have nothing to do with elections.
And you're very clear, at no stage has the judicial process been influenced, therefore, by the executive during your tenure.
Yes.
Okay. The tangle between the executive and judiciary, sir, over appointments. You were Chief Justice for almost 18 months. And during that period, not a single Supreme Court judge was appointed.
Yes.
Because the collegium system could not arrive at a consensus.
No, it is not because of the collegium system. It is because as a collegium, we were unable to arrive at a consensus. It is not because of the system. It is because we failed as a collegium to arrive at a consensus about the names.
Because a particular...
Or in some cases, about the order in which there should be an elevation.
Because there was a particular judge in your collegium who insisted that Justice Akhil Qureshi be elevated to the Supreme Court. The government didn't want his name.
Akhil Qureshi was one of the judges who was not appointed. There were many who were not appointed.
That's right.
They were all appointed afterwards.
But for 18 months, we did not have a single appointment to the Supreme Court.
Yes. So,
what does that suggest?
There have been periods when you haven't had elevation for 2 years. You haven't had elevation for longer. What is so extraordinary about this? We couldn't arrive at a consensus. It can happen in a human institution.
Do you believe, therefore, that there is a need to relook at the system as it exists? Why should judges, 5 brother-sister judges sit together and decide on who will be their fellow judges? Should the executive have a greater say, as the executive seems to want? The law minister seems to be running a campaign calling for a review of the collegium system.
Let's not go by the government of the day, the law minister of the day, or the chief justices at the collegium of the day. I'll tell you what my perspective is.
Sir.
My perspective is that under the Constitution of India, there are 3 organs of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. They are separated in their functions and powers. They are not separated in their purpose and objective. The objective of all three has to be the common objective set out in the Constitution in the preamble. I consider it perfectly legitimate that the executive has a vital interest in who is going to be a judge. Apart from the fact that they are the executive and one of the organs of government, they are also the largest litigant in any court. Now the problem is not that they have an interest in it. The problem is how to give effect to that interest. Earlier, it was only the Chief Justice of India who decided it along with the government. Sometimes the Prime Minister, the executive, the law minister. Then came the two judges case. It was widened. The Chief Justice of India's power was shared with the collegium. Power and responsibility. It was also, you brought in more fresh views on the same elevation. Then came the parliamentary law NJA, National
NJC.
Judicial NJC. That provided a wide representation to all kinds of opinions, including to social workers, eminent people. The Supreme Court did not agree with it, and they struck down that law. They also struck down the constitutional amendment on the ground that the independence of the judiciary expressed through the appointment of judges is a part of the basic structure. So there was no say to the executive formally. And that is as it is at the moment.
Do you support that?
What?
You believe that the executive should have no say in the appointment?
I don't support it. I started by saying that they have a vital interest in the...
Should they have a veto power?
No. They shouldn't have a veto power. The primacy of opinion must be that of the judiciary. The reason is, we know what is the caliber, the merit, and the suitability of the judges who are to be elevated. We have seen them right from the days they were lawyers. We have heard appeals against their judgments. We know how they think. We are best positioned to see which judge is meritorious. But those judges of the superior court, we are only talking of superior courts, because in the 70% of the judiciary, the public service commissions appoint them, which includes the government.
Yes.
We are only talking of High Court and Supreme Court. These courts, these judges have to take an oath of office. That oath of office says that I shall uphold the sovereignty and integrity of India, that I shall uphold the Constitution and the laws, and other things.
Yes.
It is important that a judge can do that as a judge. And on these aspects, it is often the executive's opinion which is vital. For instance, when the Intelligence Bureau reports to us, things like what are the activities of this judge. Now, you imagine a situation, a gross case, where one of the candidates is of the opinion that India should not be a sovereign entity like it is. There should be a separate state somewhere. Separate means outside India. The executive is in the best position to tell the court that this is not a suitable candidate, the collegium. So the executive's opinion is important. With or without the NJC, I have full respect for the judgment of the Supreme Court. I am saying that consultation with the executive can be made by the Chief Justice of India and the collegium, their views taken, but I believe the primacy must remain with the Chief Justice or the collegium.
Okay, I think you've been pretty clear, categorical in that sense now about that. Consultation, but the final say must remain with the collegium is what you're telling me.
And consultation, I do not mean concurrence.
Okay, point taken. So we have very limited time left, but I'm going to ask you some more. Let's lighten the mood. The most difficult case in your career?
It's a case I didn't decide, but I'll tell you some. I mean, there was a laborer who was charged with rape and murder of a young girl.
Yes.
And and that chap had been convicted. When the appeal was pending, the investigating officer committed suicide, saying that I have been forced to implicate this chap. And he managed it successfully. The High Court agreed that his suicide note is true. And we were hearing an appeal. Obviously, he ought to have gone scot-free. This is Lalit, the expert in criminal law. But I took the view that we should not acquit him till we prosecute these prosecution witnesses who had lied through their teeth. And there was a difference of opinion between my colleague and me. He said, no, we'll just let him go. I said, no, we must prosecute him. Fortunately, unfortunately, the bench changed. And I couldn't decide that case, but I have never been so foxed in a case as in this one. Because the suicide note was not part of the trial record.
It's interesting you're saying that, because your one judgment did create a lot of controversy, where you, not judgment, but an observation you made in court, where you suggested to a rape victim that she marry.
I didn't.
This is what was reported.
I'll tell you what happened.
That she marry her alleged rapist.
Frankly, I want to tell you what happened because I haven't got a chance to tell anyone what happened.
Please do.
The boy and the girl had a love affair. They were related to each other distantly. They had a love affair, and the parents on both sides objected because they were spending a lot of time together. So they told them, you get married. You can't carry on like this. They had an affair for 7-8 years. And they signed an agreement that we'll marry. Now that chap came in appeal. He applied for bail. And that woman then said that I'll prosecute you for rape because we've been having sex and you haven't married me. So that his bail was rejected. He came by way of a bail application before the Supreme Court. I told him that what is this matter? You've been living together and there is this agreement on record which you have signed to solve this family dispute. Right. And are you going to get married or not? That is what I asked.
Okay.
Just a minute. And then I rejected his bail application because they said, no, we have not married. I haven't followed this agreement. I rejected his bail application. And these intelligent people in society wrote to me saying that you must review your orders. Means what? Grant him bail. Absurd thing.
Okay, this is the danger of obiter dicta.
Yeah.
Making headlines. But my final question is, there was a nice picture of you on a Harley Davidson. We haven't seen too many CJIs on a Harley Davidson. You're a motorbike fan. We didn't know it till then. Any regrets about posing there in...
I wasn't posing. Somebody got that Harley Davidson. I sat on it. And there was somebody who had nothing to do with anything who took a picture and sent it to her lawyer husband.
Right.
And that is how it went around. I didn't ride it. I only sat on it, though I would have liked to ride it, I will tell you that. It was COVID times, a lot of, the rest. But frankly, I became very popular with the younger crowd.
You did. and you've also become very popular among judges because during COVID times, you brought in online technology to encourage more and more people to appear before court. It's now hybrid, and I think it's made a huge difference to the courts, and that will be one of your many abiding legacies, Justice Bobde. But thank you so much for joining us and giving us your perspective. Appreciate Justice Bobde there taking those questions. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you raise a warm applause for Justice Bobde, may I please call upon Mr. Virendra Kumar Kasliwal to come up on stage. He's the Chief Financial Controller. Sir, just 2 minutes, sir. To come up on stage and present a small token of our appreciation to Justice Bobde.
It's not a Harley Davidson, don't worry. You have one. Wow. Thank you so much, sir. Okay,
Thank you, sir.
That's not it.
So Rajdeep continues with our next session. As he said, we have 2 former Chief Justices and the current there. So the next session, over to you, Rajdeep.
Our second Chief Justice is another very distinguished occupant of the post who served as Chief Justice for just 74 days last year, but whose tenure is marked by truly some remarkable achievements. Most notably, the manner in which more than 16,000 cases were listed and almost 4,000 of them were cleared within the first 12 days of his tenure as CJI. And constitution benches were set up to dispose of key pending cases of constitutional importance. Please welcome Justice U.U. Lalit. Firstly, Justice Lalit, the manner in which you attempted to clear that judicial pile, that pile up in the apex court, was that a mission that you set yourself when you became Chief Justice? You knew you were Chief Justice for less than 3 months, but quite remarkably from day one, you really cracked the whip.
It was not a mission, but it was something like a concerted action on part of everyone who was on the bench. The day I took over, same day we had a full court meeting, and I placed before all the judges the statistics that there are about, say, 55 death sentence matters which are pending. And under the regime that the Supreme Court has accepted, a death sentence matter has to come before a bench of 3 judges, which means that one must have sufficient number of 3-judge bench combinations. If you have just 1 or 2 combinations, the judges get sort of, it starts weighing on their conscience that how many death sentence matter am I supposed to hear? So I said we must have at least 6 3-judge combinations so that we can divide the work amongst the benches. We were 30 judges. So I also told all my colleague judges that divide 30 number by 5 and we can possibly have 6 constitution benches. All of us will be part of the benches. So what I did was 6 3-judge combinations, which means 18, 6 2-judge combinations, which means 12. Every time, just add A on one side and B on the other, and you have a constitution bench. So this is how we started. Then the second part which I told the judges was that there were referred matters to 3 judges combination which were pending consideration. What happens is, on a question of law, if a matter is referred to a bench of 3 judges, there is a domino effect that there are a number of other matters which are waiting for the decision in that matter. So therefore, if you decide one matter, logically you are actually deciding host of the other matters. So therefore, it is in this situation that we devised a way, and that's how we started. And I must thank every colleague of mine that everyone rose to the occasion and we started disposing of matters.
But it's had a huge effect. I can tell you that a lot of lawyers have truly appreciated it. Those who cover the courts have appreciated what you did. But, I'll give you an example. Number of cases that were pending for a long time. The Siddiq Kapan case. A journalist is arrested under UAPA in 2020 October. The bench headed by you grants him bail in August 2022. And this comes at a time when a number of lower courts in this country are reversing the basic principle of law, bail not jail. They're instead saying, not granting bail. You can go to Shah Rukh Khan's son's case in a lower court or a number of other less high profile cases. Is that a worry for you? that, as someone who's an expert on criminal law, that a number of judges, especially in the lower courts, are not granting bail in cases where bail should have been given as in the normal courts?
See, it depends upon the perspective of an individual. Some of the trial court judges, perhaps, they think that the case is not made out for grant of bail. Add to it one more dimension. Many of the statutory provisions make it difficult to grant bail. So therefore, there is an embargo under the statutory provision. Say, for instance, NDPS law, the bail cannot be granted so easily. So therefore, a satisfaction first has to be entertained, has to be recorded by the judge that very well, in my view, the man is not guilty of the offense with which he is charged. And then only the process of bail consideration then happens. So most of these occasions where the trial court or the judges in the first court do not grant bail may be because, number one, that the matter is still sort of, pending investigation. So therefore, on most of the occasions, the investigating machinery comes up before the court and says that we are still in the process of investigating. So therefore, the court has to make up mind whether on the basis of material case is made out or not, or should I wait for some more material? It may be that way.
But do you think there needs to be a review of the process, that the Supreme Court needs to send out, perhaps the Chief Justice Office needs to send out perhaps a clearer message? Look at the way PMLA, sir, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, has now, and it's based now on a Supreme Court judgment, virtually giving police powers of a kind to the Enforcement Directorate that are draconian. Because it essentially means you are guilty and you will have to prove innocence. Enforcement Directorate can come into my house under PMLA, arrest me, and I will struggle to get bail for months on end, even if I may be innocent.
You are right, it may happen in an individual case, but if you see the judgment of the Supreme Court, which was rendered by a bench of 3 judges, of course the review is pending on that issue. But this very point was urged before the court, and the court did not consider it appropriate to rule on that, to say, and actually said that PMLA definitely hinges on one part, which is that the bail provisions, as I mentioned in the earlier just about 5 minutes back, some of these statutory provisions make it difficult to grant bail, and PMLA is one of them.
Should they be reviewed?
Then the validity of the legislation has to be challenged, number one. Number two, it is a parliamentary legislation. So therefore, it is our legislators who have come out with this particular law. Unless and until that legislation is validly challenged before the court is bound to proceed on the basis of that.
Justice Lalit, let me come to where, in a way, the thread that I began with Justice Bobde. How independent are our courts? Has the apex court in this country turned into what scholars like Gautam Bhatia have suggested, an executive court, mindful of being in line with whatever the political executive really wants? Basically, for all the obiter dicta that often we hear from judges, all the fire and brimstone against the government, when it comes to the judgments, they fall in line with what the political executive wants. This is what legal scholars suggest is the making of an executive court.
I do not subscribe to that view at all. According to me, all the courts are quite independent, and you will actually see it in the process. Say, for instance, 2 matters which came before me. One was Siddiq Kappan, the other was Tista Setalwad. Both of them were released on bail. Another matter which came before me, Vinod Dua, he was also granted solace relief in the matter. Third one, again somebody from Varavara Rao, again we granted him relief. It's not as if, please, and what happens is we jump in immediately to make a generalized statement. It is not so. The courts are completely independent, and this kind of theory which Justice Bobde actually referred to, that it is very, very difficult for the judges and very easy for somebody from outside to criticize that, correct?
As media persons, we can...
Of course, yes, you are entitled to.
It's our job to, in a way, question. You say criticize, but the sealed envelope, important cases, the judges say, please give it to us in a sealed envelope. We don't know what's in the sealed envelope. That results in a lack of transparency.
I'll tell you, this all started in that Vineet Narayan case,
That's
which
right.
was Jain Diary case, correct? At that juncture, the Supreme Court was interfering or was considering the matter, and at that juncture, the investigation was still on. It was not clear whether the material which the investigator had collected, was it worthy, was it sufficient? But at the same time, the court just wanted to consider that the issue was considered or looked into by the investigators. So therefore, sealed envelope was entertained. The court did not pass any order. All that it said is that if, according to you, Mr. Investigator, there is a case made out, proceed further. That's it.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned just now, a little while ago, the Teesta settlement case. Because I recall, sir, and let me be honest today, when you became Chief Justice, there was media comment again that Justice Lalit, I think when you became a judge actually, that you had been Amit Shah's counsel in the Sohrabuddin case, and that will Justice Lalit therefore be truly independent? You showed through your judgments that you were independent, and kudos to you for that. But there was this sense that did that ever weigh on your mind, that will the media commentary that plays out, that here is the Home Minister's former counsel in the Sohrabuddin case, now the Chief Justice. Were you under extra pressure at any stage?
Not at all. See, as a lawyer, I represented something like 18 chief ministers in various matters, including S.M. Krishna, who was from Congress, Sukhram, who was from Congress, some of the 3 chief ministers from Maharashtra who were from Congress, Yediyurappa, who was BJP, then Jayalalitha, who was again in the opposition. So I have represented number of them. I have not met any one of them. So therefore, it was only pure and simple professional assignment. To me, it was like appearing in any matter, whether it was ABC, XYZ, or that politician. Makes no difference.
That's wonderful to hear, sir, because I think it's important to recognize perhaps that sometimes the media criticism, as you said, is based around speculation. But let's come for a moment to judicial pressure. During your term, the one case where you found yourself in a bit of a spot, you listed a case on a Saturday on an appeal filed by the Maharashtra government challenging the acquittal of a DU professor, G.N. Sai Baba, accused of Maoist links. Many saw this as unusual, especially as Justice Chandrachud on the Friday had orally expressed a view against any urgent listing. Next morning, listing takes place, a bench sits, and the acquittal is suspended. And many believe that this was done under pressure.
I've already responded to this line of question in one of the interviews, and that was by, perhaps I think, Srinivasan Jain.
That's right, after
Correct?
you
Yes,
debated
that's
office.
Right. I'll tell you, in case now that you have repeated the question, then I must answer it completely. See, it was a Friday, and that was the last working day for Justice Hemant Gupta. So he was demitting office, and on the last day, the custom is that the retiring judge sits in with the Chief Justice. So he was sitting with me. And the last day, the number of matters which are listed before such a bench are very, very less. So we rose for the day around 1 o'clock. The matter was mentioned in court number 2 because the Chief's court was not sitting. So it was mentioned before the bench presided over by Justice Chandrachud. Justice Chandrachud, naturally, because when you are mentioning, the papers are not before you. So the matter was mentioned by the learned Solicitor General, and his first reaction was that in case the bail is the issue, then why should we list it tomorrow? Correct. But finally, the Solicitor General perhaps was able to convince him. So therefore, the order which was passed had 3 paragraphs. Number 1, saying that the apprehension is expressed by Mr. Solicitor General that in case the matter is not heard immediately, the person may be released immediately.
Yes.
Number 2, we therefore allow him to make a mention before so that to get the matter listed next day. Now, it was possible for the court to list the matter next week because the normal mentioning was there. But the court was definitely convinced that if we list the matter sometime next week, that is Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, perhaps the urgency which has been canvassed will completely get nullified. And therefore, the chance had to be given that in case the matter can be listed on Saturday. Now, the other thing is, Such kind of urgent listings, the court number 2 is not entitled to do. Going by the master of roster, it is only the chief who can do it. So therefore, the order was actually put in a very, very, what we say is the format of deference, that we give liberty so and so to make a mention. But the intent of the order is that definitely you consider the matter. So therefore, at about say 4 o'clock when the matter was brought before me, the order, the paper book again was not before me. Secondly, the man who brings before me the order was not aware as to what oral observations were made by the court while the mentioning was on. So I was to go to the hall where the final felicitation of Justice Gupta was to be undertaken. So as we enter, the first person that I wish to contact is Justice Chandrachud himself. I approach him and say that now that you have actually come out with this order, will you be part of the special bench to be constituted tomorrow? He had certain reservations because he had given some kind of commitments to somebody. So therefore he said it won't be possible. The major part of the day I have given some commitments. So therefore I turned to the next, because it was right there, all the judges were there. So 3 judges, Justice Rastogi, Justice Gawai, and Justice Suryakant, I approached them. They again say that we have some other commitments. The 4th judge that I approach is Justice Ravindra Bhatt. He said, sir, I have actually called the steno to complete a judgment, so therefore I have some commitment on that front. But in case you don't get anybody, I'm willing. So as a default option. So the next person that I contact is Justice Bela Trivedi. She says yes. Then the man next who I bump into is Justice M.R. Shah. I again put the same question to him. He said yes. So this is how the bench got constituted.
Okay, I'm glad
now,
you gave...
No, just listen to that. None of those persons, neither M.R. Shah, nor Bela Trivedi, nor me, are aware of the intricacies of the matter. The intricacies of the matter are actually before the bench which had heard the mentioning. None of us were even aware of that. We simply listed the matter next day. Why? In deference to what the order had said.
Okay, it's interesting that you've given that backstory to clear the air. Again, it's part, as I said, therefore, the media will have their own commentary, which carries on, and I will come to the media pressures on a judge. But very quickly, sir, collegium system. Do you approve of what the law minister has been saying publicly, calling for a review of the system? Do you believe that the executive deserves a greater say, or some would even say a return to the NJSC, the National Judicial Appointments Committee? Do we need a return to that?
See, as judges, we take oath that we will abide by the Constitution as by law established. Wasn't it the judgment of the 5 judges which said that NJSC is not the correct law? So are we supposed to observe and go by the Constitution as by law established, or have a different modality? We had to observe purely by the collegium system. See, in a polity, if you have another system, if you have another regime in contemplation, let that regime be put in place in a manner known to law. The moment it is put in place, the judges will be bound to observe that. As of now, if you ask me my personal view, then according to me, the collegium system is the ideal system.
Is the ideal system?
Absolutely.
You don't believe it leads to aberrations, it leads to sort of lack of, there is an opacity to it, there is a sense that the judiciary becomes a bit of a cabal that decides on its own who will be the fellow judges?
See, I'll tell you. Now, this collegium which was headed by Justice Ramana, where I was judge number 2 in the court, we had Justice Khanvilkar as number 3, and 3 of us, we made recommendations which were accepted by the government, and about 255 persons were appointed. At the same time, we did not accept the matters which were coming through the collegium of the High Court. And about 70 or 80 names we rejected. 40 odd names are still under consideration by the government. So therefore, look at the kind of, the statistics themselves show that we at the apex level, we don't accept everything which comes through the collegium of the High Court. Now, how is the matter actually coming through the collegium? See, you require judges at every level. the whole system is geared to have the best possible talent. Now, under the Constitution, the lower judiciary or the district judiciary is completely under the control of the High Court. Appointments, posting, promotion, transfers, everything is done by the High Court. The executive has no say. It is through these courts that 1/3 of the strength of the High Court is actually forming. So you have those persons whose entire profile is seen by the High Court at every juncture, not just one or two persons, but repeatedly as an institution. Similarly, the advocates who practice before the High Court, the judges who form the body, they see their performance every day. So who are actually supposed to be better positioned to see the merit or the talent? Somebody sitting as an executive here, or somebody who is actually seeing the grassroots level performance, say in Kochi or in Manipur or in Andhra or in, say, Ahmedabad?
Now,
it is the High Court alone.
So let me quote again Dushyant Dave, a senior Supreme Court advocate. We have a large number of judges who are highly questionable. They either lack the expertise or the knowledge, and most of all the commitment. I know of judges who haven't delivered a single good judgment.
I don't know about Mr. Dushyant Dave's sort of, this particular statement and why he made that statement. But it is for him to justify that. I can't actually have a counter justification, correct? According to me, see, that is exactly why. When a man is made judge of the High Court, you see the performance. When we select a man, Justice Bobde, anybody who has been part of the collegium, we see the judgments, we see the kind of performance which he has over a period of time has actually come out with. It is after that 5 judges of the Supreme Court then consider whether a man is worthy or not. At the same time, they are also guided by the advice given by what we call the consultee judges. So in the process, there are not just 5 who are collegium judges, but there are other consultee judges as well. At the same time, the version coming from the executive, as Justice Bobde said, that perhaps it may have something to say about the profile of the man. It may be that there may be some kind of complaint against him. There may be something, some dark corner somewhere in the persona, which perhaps as judge in the collegium, we are not aware of. So therefore, that part of the consultation through IB reports, through everything, is also placed before the court. It is after that the process, that the decision is taken.
Okay, because there are interesting cases like that of Justice of Senior Advocate Saurabh Kirpal, which has been held up, and its result is his sexual reason for it. All of this is speculated.
See, again, now just consider this. The collegium did not falter on Saurabh Kirpal's case. Collegium did make a recommendation. Collegium did reiterate. So how do you say collegium system is bad? It is the fault lies somewhere else, if at all.
Okay. I want to ask you this in conclusion. You quite wonderfully, after you've retired, have gracefully gone to teach OP Jindal University, Mumbai, IIT. You're teaching constitutional law. Honest answer. Should former CJIs or judges after retirement take any government sinecure without a cooling off period? We've just had a Supreme Court fellow colleague of yours becoming a governor of a state. We've had a Supreme Court Chief Justice becoming a nominated member of the Rajya Sabha. Do you believe this is a healthy practice?
It all depends upon the individual. See, some individuals may find nothing objectionable. A person like me would rather say that, very well, let me try something else in another quarter. Correct? I have been a lawyer, I have been a judge. Let me be a professor now. Yes.
I think those cheers really say it all, that there is a problem if you don't have a cooling off period. So very quickly, your most difficult case.
Not in terms of any quality or any kind of problem which it posed, but sheer bulk of the matter, that was 2G. The kind of paperwork which ran into lakhs and lakhs of pages, to be controlling that, to be sort of in the midst of everything, where there were, at least by the time we finished, more than 150 witnesses were examined, so much of documentation. So sheer bulk, that was the only thing.
What's the most satisfying thing about being a judge? You were a very successful lawyer. What was most satisfying of being a judge? You must have taken a huge cut in salary to become a judge.
All that is something completely a personal decision, correct? Yes. See, I always felt that I have been part of this institution. Before I took that plunge, I had put in about 32 years in the practice as a lawyer. I have earned some name, some fame, some money, some stature. It is only through that profession, which is the law profession. So there is some way to give back to the society, and that is where I accepted judgeship. Another feature or another form in which I wish to give it back to the society is teach the law students. That's it.
Three words to describe the state of the Supreme Court today.
Fantastic court, yet tremendous area for improvement.
Okay, I think you've left enough. You've given us a teaser perhaps for another interview where we'll discuss perhaps those areas of improvement. But Justice Lalit, it's been a pleasure having you here today.
The pleasure has been mine.
And speaking so openly and freely, I think moment people demit office, some of that burden goes away and you can speak even more freely. And I'm sure that's as true of you as many others.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Justice UU Lalit.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Justice UU Lalit as I call upon Nitin Seth, Vice Chairman Tops, to come up on stage and present a very small token of our appreciation to Justice Lalit. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. Raise a warm applause for Justice UU Lalit. Ladies and gentlemen, just want to give you a heads up. The photo exhibit that I was telling you about right outside at the Shah Jahan Hall, where India Today's AI team has completely reimagined some of our iconic covers, is only going to be there for just about an hour or two more. So do go out, step out, take a look, because we're going to clear the hall for the Prime Minister's security. He is our keynote speaker this evening. The area will need to be sanitized, so do go ahead and if you haven't till now, and I recommend it highly, you must go and do it. Also want to reiterate that whatever you've seen yesterday, today, where thought leaders from all walks of life coming in together, sharing their vision of the India moment, all of that, the highlights of it will be re-encapsulated in our next edition of the India Today magazine. All right, we're ready to go into our next session for this afternoon. Do settle down. Those crowding the aisles, please just come in, settle down. All right, let's get into our next session this afternoon. Soul eclipse, why our children are self-harming, how to fix it, insights on the teenage depression epidemic in India. We've put together a short film on teenage depression. I'd like you to see it before we cut across to our session's moderator.
teenage and depression, they just don't go together, right?
I was around 16 years old. Day after day, I would wake up feeling shattered.
I think one of my closest friends struggled with mental health. I think she was just 12 or 13.
It took me more than 6 months of suffering, 3 or 4 suicidal attempts. And many notices from university of absence to convince my parents that I need medical attention.
A lot of my friends have considered or have actually self-harmed.
In my circle of friends, I've encountered a lot of cases of depression and anxiety.
Do not really understand what depression is. They think that you have to be of a certain age to be depressed.
Bullying would be one of the biggest reasons for depression. Body shaming people, making fun of people for their sexuality.
There's this need to please on social media, being very conscious of what you're posting, wanting to edit every picture.
Be it in family or in school, people are unconsciously pressure boys to be a certain way.
First would definitely be family issues. My parents, they didn't handle their divorce as well as they should have, and I feel like that's the case with a lot of people, and they involve their child too much, way more than they should.
I think bullying is a big one. A lot of people still feel like they can't confide in their parents.
There's a big divide between people of other sexualities and people who are considered to be conventional.
Everything is so competitive. Anything below 99.99% feels like a failure.
Body is a very big one. Skinny is a constant one. Then there's snatched, which is having a really small waist. Yeah.
Domestic violence obviously has to be on that list, because once a child sees that, it traumatizes them for the rest of their lives.
It's not just sadness, but it's prolonged sadness.
Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, the one which I grew up in, there aren't enough examples how to be around such a person and how to extend a helping hand to such a person.
One thing I've realized is the importance of therapy, but even before that, the importance of clear and honest conversations. When we are going through a tough phase mentally, we know what we need to do. We know how we can get out of it. It's just that we can't do it.
It was always a hush-hush topic. Even at home, it was always a hush-hush topic. It's a very tricky, murky battle to fight, but it starts with baby steps. And the first being acknowledging that it might just exist and it's not such a bad thing.
To an extent, social media should be age restricted. 8-year-olds shouldn't be exposed to the same things a 16-year-old would be allowed to be exposed to.
If someone is depressed, their loved one should just be with them. Whenever mom has panic attacks, I'm just always with her. So, and then I guess that calms her down. I guess it was the divorce between her and dad which triggered it.
In those moments when men do need help, it's not always given because most people feel like you shouldn't need it. Yeah, in the scope of our school, there's a very set stereotype of who will be popular and which girls are pretty, and because of that, how well liked they are.
I think a lot of the times it's just seen as attention seeking. Awareness doesn't always mean understanding.
Depression is just so commonplace. It's an irony how it's not there in everyday conversation as it should be.
Well, to take it from here, I'd like to invite our session's moderator, Shoma Chaudhary, consulting editor, India Today Group.
Good morning. Continuing a tradition that India Today started 2-3 years ago of spotlighting a very, very important issue in our society, which is teenage mental health. It's not talked about enough. And we're really hoping that these sessions will draw more and more attention to this. You saw this little film. It gives a sense of the echo chamber of how widespread this is. There were some statistics there, and I'll just share one more before I call the panelists on stage, which is that in India, and this is all underreporting, there are about 200 million people who suffer from active depression, and only about 30% are seeking help. And to show that this is really something that's ever escalating, in America, we've just, some statistics say that 60% of young girls in America, 3 out of 5 are so persistently sad that they have fallen out of normal activities. So that's really like canaries, telling us what's wrong with our society. And to discuss that, to draw attention, we have a really, poignant, powerful panel today. And I'd like to first call on stage Pranavi Khandekar. She's 22 years old. Pranavi, please give her a warm welcome. Pranavi is 22 years old. She's studying psychology at Ambedkar University. And Pranavi is somebody who suffered from depression from the time she was 9 to, she's still coping, healing. She's someone who's self-harmed, who's tried to commit suicide, has OD'd, and she's here to tell us, what really happened with her and what was her state of mind during those years. I'd next like to call on stage Abha Adams, who is a very, very respected, well-known educator in India. She has been the director of Shri Ram Step by Step and has worked with children for more than 30 years. She's written a book called Parenting in the Age of Anxiety. So please give a warm welcome to Abha. And now we have Nupur Dhingra, who's a psychotherapist and psychologist, works with her consultancy practice is called Family Tree, and she works a lot with young children and families, so has great insight into what's going on. And next I'd like to call Shudipto Patra, who is a parent, he's a professional in his own right, a media person, but again, who both his sons have suffered from acute depression, the elder son more so, is someone again who's self-harmed, tried to commit suicide, and is now, in the process of transitioning to a new gender. And Shudipto's here to share with us, from a parent's perspective, how to deal with children who are wounded in any way. So thank you very much for joining us. Pranavi, I wanted to start with you, and thank you so much for trusting us with your story. As I shared with the audience already, that, at age 9, you discovered that you're adopted, and that seemed to have triggered a spiral in you, and then it played out over many years. Can you share with us your state of mind during that time? What does depression really feel like?
Okay, so I felt tired and scared at the same time. It was feeling so much and nothing at all at once. Sometimes I was just feeling numb. I would have sleepless nights. I'd just toss and turn around the bed, not being able to sleep. But there were also times I would sleep 2, 3, like the entire day for like a couple of weeks. But if it was basically to escape the reality. That's what I feel. And it felt as if I'm walking on a thin rope, trying to balance myself while carrying heavy rocks. And I was scared. What if I fall? What if I crash? I felt as if I had millions of tangled wires inside my head. It was so messy and it was so disturbing. I wanted to untangle them, like each one of them, but then there were just too many, so I just gave up even before I could start. It was frustrating. I felt choked, I felt suffocated, and the pain was too much inside.
So, Pranavi, you shared with me earlier that your mother was quite a supportive person, and yet you were self-harming, and this is something that bewilders a lot of people. That, can you share with us, what was the reason that you would, cut yourself? You're already in so much pain. Why were you then further cutting yourself?
Okay, so I was in so much pain within, and I just couldn't take it anymore. Sometimes my body would feel numb. I didn't know what to do. Sometimes I needed to feel the pain, so I would keep checking, okay, am I still working? Is my body still working? Am I okay? What's happening? I was scared. And sometimes it would be because I was just scared, and I felt that was the only time I was seen, not by just others, but by my own self. It felt more real, you know, like, agar kisi ko chot lagti hai, so they're like, oh, isko lag gayi hai, isko, like, he's in pain, like, they can see, they acknowledge it. So when I would self-harm, I could acknowledge my inner pain as well. Like, it's that much that it's led to all of this. So, I mean, that was how it.
So it was literally like giving vocabulary to what was inside.
Exactly,
to make
yes.
it visible. You know, I'm going to come back to you to talk to us about what helped you heal, but I just wanted to share with the audience that in addition to finding out about her adoption, there were other triggers for Pranavi, which was that she was fat-shamed. You said you were about 90 kilos,
yeah.
And she was fat-shamed. People remarked about her color, her peers. She shifted schools, you know, teachers, parents. There was a lot of stuff going on for her, and I want you to help us untangle that. Yes. But Abha, here's where I want to come to you. You know, you've been working for 30 years and more possibly with students and children. What is going wrong, Abha? And you know, there's always been generation gaps, stuff that we've heard about, parent-child conflicts. But in the last 10 years, what has escalated so much that we're seeing this phenomenon, you know, this epidemic of teenage depression?
I think it's been there for the last 20 years and we didn't realize the early starts. But I believe the last 10 years has really shown the impact of the kind of accelerated change that our society is going through. Dr. Shailja Sen, when I spoke to her, said something very interesting, and she said, children are the canaries of our times. If children are broken, then society is broken. And looking at it from that perspective, I think we've fractured ourselves in many ways. We've given in to rampant consumerism. We have the commercialization of practically every aspect of our lives, whether it's giving birth to babies or preschool, whatever it is. The digitalization and that takeover has particularly, when you add that to the mix, added to this sense of, I'm not perfect. There is a photoshopped mirage of perfection that our parents and our young are looking at, which gives them that this is how you need to be. You need to have a glistening skin, you need to be tall, you need to be skinny, you need to have straight hair, you need to be fair. And what's more, you need to have a happy, happy life. Happy holidays. But life's not like that. Life isn't all happiness. And as parents, if we, and I'm afraid that's what we have done, become aspirational for that perfect, the myth of happy families and perfection, that my children are going to succeed, and you define that success mantra. You don't look at your child and see what is the child's own particular yearning, passion, unique ability or trait. And it's happening with schools as well. But you define the success mantra, which is great marks. You want to intervene?
No, I just wanted to pull the others in because... So,
okay, absolutely, absolutely.
So, you know, Nupur, before I come to Shudipto, you're seeing the really injured end of the spectrum of hurting children. So give us some insight that when you're dealing with parents and with children who've actually finally come to you for help, dive deeper also from what Abha is saying, which is a societal level, what's going on, you know?
One of the first things that we get to see in our practice is how young people really struggle with being taken seriously. To have their distress really acknowledged and taken seriously by school, family, and a bit like the video that you showed just now, where the words that the young people are saying are about their distress, but then you listen to the music, and the music is all very happy, happy.
Yeah.
And
I wanted that disjunction to show.
And that is the disjunct about the facade that has to be on the outside and the internal experience. Whether it's
family or schools or institutions, we don't really know what to do with distress. And there is a wish, a fantasy that we can medicalize it and that a pill will help us will help to make us feel better. That's not how it works.
So what works? If you were to give us just one lever that everyone should have, what would that be?
I'm going to actually connect to what Pranavi just said, which was to acknowledge that it's there. I'd say over 50% of the work we do day in and day out in our consulting rooms is listen. We listen to what the young people are saying. We zip our mouths, our opinions, which we have. We're not neutral parties. We come from our own history and prejudices even. And we were adolescents once, etc. But we listen.
So I'm going to come back to both you and Abha. You know, you've mentioned listening, and Abha also has an idea of the kind of parenting that over all these years she feels that one really needs to do. I'm going to come back to both of you. Shudipto, I wanted to pull you in here that, you've been a parent that's now seen both your children go through a journey of suffering. What has your experience been? Did you start from a position of blindness and bewilderment, and through this arc, where have you reached, which makes you a better support system for your children?
Okay, before I answer that, may I pull the audience in? How many people have, within their first line of family, experienced mental health issues? Can I show of hands? So that's sort of less than 30%. We have an audience which still needs to get sensitized, maybe. Mental health doesn't come knocking at your door. It will not say that I'm here. How to be sensitive and be aware is an ongoing process. Now, that's where I'm here primarily to share with you some of the things that, with the benefit of hindsight, we can say that might be done better. One of the first things that I would like to say is to allow children to remain children. How do we do that? It's such a simple thing to say, but it's a complex thing to live. Do you give them aspirations? Well, you do, but don't pin the future on them. Now, that's complicating matters. Do you say that, tomorrow you will have a career and go and score? We saw the video, some 99%, etc. people are saying. Maybe it's not a good idea. If your child is willing to take that, go ahead and do it. But if your child is not willing, so listen. Also listen to what the child is not saying. I think that's something that we have learned the hard way. You have to be able to listen to what the child is not saying as well. Very often, the child is not saying what the issue is. And that becomes more important than what the child is saying, because the child might be under pressure from you, from teachers, from peer group, from society, from anywhere.
Here, I just wanted to, again, for the audience to really understand this, maybe you could share that incident when Ambuj, who's now transitioning into Anjalika, but when he had ADHD, you didn't really understand, and he was sent off to military school. And what happened over there as a parent, I think that'll really help the audience understand.
So, one of the things that, it's an incident, let me try and narrate it as briefly as possible. It's not as if ADHD or ADHD children do not go to the military. So those are not linked. However, they cannot be trained into the military till they are ready to know what military demands. So that's where we made the mistake. The call was still ours. Went to a military school at an age when the call was still for the parent to take, not the child to take. So we take responsibility, we don't blame ourselves. Now that's the other important thing that the parents have to keep in mind. Take responsibility, take charge, do what needs to be done, but don't blame yourself, because blaming yourself is no good. It's useless. So he went there, and they have to do all kinds of things. They have to play hockey, and he would say that, I can't connect the ball. He would narrate the story and come back during vacations and say that, if I swing the stick, either I pull some mud out of the ground or I am not able to connect to the ball. Obviously, later we figured out he had a condition called sensory integration difficulty. Most of you might have seen Tare Zameen Par, where a child learns to pick up how the ball is coming, how to connect, etc. Now, some children will not learn it.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in only because, we're going to run out of time and I really want to come back to everyone.
Please go ahead.
So, if I may just say it in a synopsis that, so basically Ambuj then was not suited for military school because it was so disciplinary. And I chatted with Ambuj earlier where he said it was horrible because if he wasn't able to do something, his entire batch was punished for it,
That's right.
So in addition, he had all that burden put on him and he really cracked at that point. That was the first time he really harmed himself.
So fragile shoulders should not be burdened with more weight till they are ready to take more weight.
Yeah. So I'm sorry I'm rushing you all. It's just that, these are big issues and we're sort of rushing this. But Pranavi, help us understand that, you went through this entire process and today you're sitting here facing an entire audience. For someone who couldn't face yourself, what was it that helped you heal?
I think therapy and medication combined helped me be the person I am today, helped me learn, helped me grow, helped me understand myself. Therapy taught me how to create space in my body to deal with and handle difficult feelings and emotions. It taught me how to create a tap in that overflowing patila of my anxiety. It taught me how to deal with my anxiety. So I was told about an anxiety meter. So 1 was the lowest, 10 was a crash. So I was able to recognize, I was slowly becoming aware of where I was. And if I would ask for help immediately when I would see myself that if I was at 3. So I think that helped me. And yeah, I have written something.
Yeah, you want to share that?
Yes.
Very, very quickly. And also, you were saying that very often now you dialogue with it's not that there's no more anxiety in you, but you've learned a way of talking to yourself.
Yes, exactly.
You want to share that?
Yeah, I would love to, yeah. So each time I get anxious or, I feel angry or throw a tantrum with my mom, for example, and I feel horrible about it. So I talk to myself. I talk to the inner child in myself. I tell it that I know that you're scared. I know that you're fearful. But it's okay, I'm here too now. I'm 22 years old. I can take charge. I don't want to abandon you. No, I don't want to. We can do collaborative work. I know you care for me, and I respect and value you. You are very valid. So I would talk to it, and I would really feel better, and I was able to activate my adult self.
Right.
Yeah.
Pranavi, I'm going to come back to you to read that because, I haven't finished just plumbing all of them. Abhay, may I come back to you that, when we were chatting earlier, you zeroed in on 2 very important things that all society needs to do, which is to communicate and connect better, Those are big words, but is there any ingredients to that we can all take away? Differing temperaments, but is there some practice we can follow?
Communication and connection at both the level at the home and the school. And I've seen that there's a breakdown in both. At the basis of communication is the fundamental need to accept. All of us want to be accepted for who we are and valued for what we bring, and to be respected. If, as a parent, I do not connect with my child with that acceptance of I see you, I hear you, I respect you, and I accept you for who you are, then that connection doesn't happen, and then communication gets worse. I owe this understanding to Gloria, who is here with us this afternoon, and who clarified that as adults, as parents and educators, when we feel insecure and inadequate, we go to our go-to place, which is controlling behavior. We want to control the child in the class, we want to control the child at home. And of course, that's a collision course. So creating safe spaces at home, early on, very early on, and at school, which is sorely lacking, the space for conversation is shrinking, leave alone a safe space, where the child knows that she has love, she has security, she has understanding, she will not be judged, she will not be belittled, and she will be accepted, where she can speak her mind to the parent and to the teacher. And that's critical. Now, it's hard because as a society, we are not used to speaking about these things. And so I think that's where training needs to begin.
Right. So again, Nupur, I'm so sorry, I'm feeling terribly this thing because we have such short time. Help us understand, you spoke about, again, this compliance, and you've spoken about listening even as a therapist, but there's a big parent community here that when you're dealing with these injured children, is there any pattern that you're seeing, which is creating that breakdown and which you feel, again, that there can be some playbook that parents can take away?
So there's three things I want to say. One is in response to Pranavi's thing about anxiety still coming up. All of us on this stage right now are anxious about different things. Anxiety is something that everybody in this room experiences. Each of your smartphones is used as anesthesia against our anxiety when it rises. So anxiety is not something that's going to go away. It's a physiological experience. So let's not make it into something that is wrong. It's about levels of anxiety, connected to which the whole point about it needing spaces of safety. See, learning can only take place when the nervous system is in a place of safety. If your child in the home or in a school or in any scenario is scared, the nervous system is overwhelmed, and fear does not become a conducive place for the nervous system to take in new information. So learning cannot take place in fear. All of you are in powerful positions in your own respective places of work. You would know what it's like to have been facing a senior who's not listening. You would know what it's like now to have a subordinate you are being now in the position where you're trying to make them listen.
No, but I just wanted to cut in here because there's one important thing. So you've made this point about the anxiety that a lot of parents that I've spoken to that even young children are confused about what's that line where you just tell someone to buck up and carry on, or when you really take it seriously enough to give it attention or therapy. Parents often kind of recognize that. Is there anything that you can give?
Yes, and it's actually a specialist thing to be able to recognize when anxiety is over threshold, and where you cannot tell them to just get on with it. But as a rule of thumb, I'd say if you're talking to teenagers or young people, avoid the word should, because then you've lost your audience. And the second one is do not tell them to get on with it, because that's very dismissive, and then you've lost your audience again.
But is there anything, how do they know when you have to go to a therapist? Like, this is happening at home. How do you know that you need to go to a therapist?
So our bottom line is take all distress seriously. After that, we can then talk about how much, when, where, and how.
Okay.
But you have to take distress seriously, because only then are they going to take you seriously.
Right. You were sharing with me earlier, there are physiological symptoms, that when being sad to just not being functional is a good example of when you need to go to a doctor, But Shudipta, I'm going to have to rush you on this, that as a parent, when your child was cutting, ODing, you had a certain response to it, which you said has helped you get through it. Would you share that in a line?
So what we did was we tried to tackle the job at hand, which was to take care of the child. We stood by the child. We didn't panic ourselves. That's one of the first things that usually we have heard other instances from other parents do. We were lucky enough not to do it. But what we fell short of is continue to show affection during that period of distress. So we needed to solve the immediate crisis when on a holiday we had a situation at home where medical aid was needed and no doctor was available. So we did what was necessary, including an intramuscular injection, tetanus, and so on, with guidance from the doctor. But what we could have done was to show more affection that we understand. That's something that is always in short supply when children have mental health challenges. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, and I'm feeling very rude to not let all of you read what you had planned to read to the audience, but I'd just like to share with you that all of them have written books, and the books are available outside on Amazon at Bahri Sons. I'm going to have to leave it here. I'm sorry Shudipta was not even able to speak about the gender dysmorphia, transitioning to a new gender, all very bewildering experiences for parents, but this is just the tip, like a torchlight. And thank you very, very much, all of you, for sharing your time and experiences with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And like Shoma pointed out, all their books are at the Roshanara Hall. You can have a chat with them if you wish to. Get your copies signed. They're right here, and they'll see you at the Roshanara Hall. But I request all of you to stay on stage for just about a minute as I call upon Mr. Ranuj Kohli from Hitachi to come up on stage and present a small token of our appreciation to our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, please raise a warm applause. Yeah. Just from the side, yeah, you can just come in from the side. Once again, they've all written books, they're all outside at the Roshanara Hall. Pick up their book, get it signed. If you want to have a chat, feel free to do so. Thank you, panelists. Let's move on right now to our next session. Social Dilemma, a steroid window into teenage alienation and class divides in India. Just give us about 10 seconds to turn around our stage and we'll be back with our session. Again, I'd like to remind you on all the sessions that have taken place here since yesterday on our 20th edition of the India Today Conclave. The highlights of that will be encapsulated in our next edition of the India Today magazine. To take it from here for our next session, Social Dilemma, a steroid window into teenage alienation and class divides in India, I'd like to call upon my colleague and our Deputy Editor, India Today Television, Akshita Nandgopal.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We just had a very, very productive, insightful discussion on teenage dystopia. So our next session is also related to that. And something that gave us a window into teenage turbulence, into what teenagers face, was a recent series on Netflix called Class. Many of you have seen it. It's got a lot of people talking, not just because of the drama, but also because it touches upon some very, very real issues. And joining us here on the India Today Conclave, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce to you the cast of Class. Please give them a big round of applause. So they've been with us backstage for the last 1.5 hours. There's a reason I haven't introduced them by name, because I'm going to get each one of them for you. And if you've seen Class, you know that they all play extremely interesting, diverse characters. I'm going to get each one of them to introduce themselves to you in their Class character. Chintan, should we begin with you?
All right. So I have to introduce myself in...
As Chintan, but in the character of Farooq.
All right. Have you guys seen Class, by the way? Yeah, so I played Farooq. So I'll just introduce myself. Schoolboys and schoolgirls. This is Chintan Raj. That's what I think Farooq would say.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So it would be on the lines of, hey schoolboy, this is Chintan Raj, and I'm an actor. I have been, इस वहाँ के आसमान का तो पता नहीं, पर क्लास में ज़रूर दिख जाऊँगा आपको.
Sivail?
राम राम भाई, सिवाइल नाम है मेरा. हाय, थैंक यू. क्रांतिकारी हूँ, भिखारी नहीं. Hi guys, Gurfateh Peerzada, and I play the character of Neeru.
Good afternoon. My name is Moses Kaul, and in the show I play Sharan Gujral. If you've seen the show right till the very end, then you know you don't want to cross me. But in real life, I love you all. Thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Nana Bhan. No one plays Koel Kalra like Koel Kalra except Nana Bhan. I'm an actor now. I was previously a filmmaker, and I'm also a newly accredited intimacy coordinator. First, thank you.
First of all, I'm kind of shocked you guys don't know who I am. I'm Zan Shaw, and you guys are very, very lucky to come watch me speak today. Thank you.
So that's the team of class for you right here at the India Today Conclave. Sivail, do you think you did justice to Bali? What is Bali known for most? There's a certain move associated with Bali that he's very well known for.
Twerking. Oh, dude. Do you want twerking?
Go for it.
Yeah, so it's like this.
Twerking is not working.
Yeah. And also Bali in Shaga, I think.
I can't unsee that. But congratulations to all of you for the success of class. It's been, I'm sure, an amazing journey for all of you. Gurfateh, beginning with you, did you expect this kind of an amazing response to class?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously, we came on this project knowing that it's going to be something path-breaking and something that's very different because the directors that we had and the platform that Netflix gave us, it was incredible. And like I said, I was just saying outside, how often do you see 11 new people in such a big show and there's absolutely no name attached to it. You go in watching the show without wanting to watch an actor or a specific star. It's and then you watch it and then hopefully you resonate with someone and then you know their names. So I think that's the biggest achievement that we feel like class gave us. And yeah, I mean, we didn't think that we'd be here. So that's great and very happy to be here.
Moses, what do you think it is about the series that's made it such a big hit? Do you think it's all of the drama that's associated with it, or there is a tinge of realness also of the teenage drama that you've kind of encapsulated? What teenagers face perhaps now?
Well, I think it's more than a tinge. I think I'll give it that it's definitely, look, it's suspended reality. That's what cinema is, right? In a lot of ways, I think why it's done the way it's done is, of course, what Gurfateh said, that when you don't know the actors or you've not seen them on Viral Bhiyani, you've not seen them being papped, you don't know what their persona is, right? For a lot of people over here, you might think that Sivail is exactly like Balli. So when you watch them, there's of course, it's easier to suspend belief and buy into the world. That's number one. Second is, we're talking about extremely pressing and sensitive issues in the show, and it's been dealt with in a way that doesn't lecture you. It's not preaching. It's addressing it in a way that is common and it's colloquial in a lot of ways. So I think that's what it is, and I feel like a lot of it also has to do with the fact that not just the actors, but the crew, the direction team, everybody pulled their own weight, right? So I think it's all of that. And of course, just that little bit, the tinge actually is the luck, not what you said otherwise, yeah.
Go ahead, Chintan.
Yeah, so I would like to add to that because now he mentioned preaching and class. So we have class and the word preaching together. So when even I got the script for the first time, like I got it way after, just because firstly, like we were all newcomers. So I think Mera script, I got it, okay, this is my part.
You're the youngest of the group also.
Yeah, wow, thank you for specifying that. I was actually writing my exams while I was shooting in the vanity. I was like, just 1 hour, guys, I just need to complete my engineering. So that's the priority, guys. So in this country, we have to study first and then you can do all of this. Like, you know it, right? You know it, I don't have to say anything. But when I read the script, it was because as now he specified the word preaching, so I have this, ये class कुछ सिखाने नहीं आया था, ये दिखाने आया था. And when I say दिखाने, and when you compare it with the cinema, so people say कि okay, cinema is a reflection, it acts like a mirror. पर हम यहाँ पर कोई आईना दिखाने नहीं आया था, हम यहाँ पर ये दिखाने आए थे कि आईना खुद मैला है. So एक चीज़ जो साफ रह सकती है वो नज़रिया है. So that is my 2 cents on it.
Very well put, very well put. Can we have a round of applause, please, for him? Zain, how did you get into the flesh of your character? How did you get into this whole teenage drama once again? You had to recap your teenage years, yes?
Of course. I mean, you asked me how I got into the skin of Veer, kind of. So I started auditioning in 2020. That's when the script first came to me. And Oshim, so I'd audition scenes where I'd have to play like the high school douchebag, and also where I'd have to I also had audition scenes with Sabha to show my softer side. And my director bought into my softer side, but he wasn't convinced I could be that aggro, mean person, I guess. So during workshops, there was a lot of, we worked a lot on the anger of the character, I think.
True.
On set, there was a lot of back and forth. Oshim would scream at me to like kind of get that reaction out of me. So yeah.
But how difficult was it for you in the sense that when you were a teenager versus now? I think the situation is very different because I feel it. When I saw Class, I was like, is this how teenagers are right now? Did you feel that?
I mean, social media is the biggest difference, I think, since when I was a teenager. And Class obviously tackles a lot of issues that social media kind of gives to you. So, I mean, I was so separated from social media before Class actually happened. I was non-existent on Instagram. And I actually have a personal story to share. I got really sick right after the release of Class. And I realized I don't think human beings are meant to feel those levels of dopamine, if you know what I mean. For the first 4 days, I was bedridden. And all I was doing was going on Instagram, refreshing, looking at my followers go up. And it felt really good, looking at the positive comments, looking at how much you guys like loved it and like accepted our characters and stuff. And after about day 4, I realized that I started feeling a little bit low, a little bit depressed. And that's when I called my mom, actually. She's sitting right there. And I had to fly back home. And what I've seen in a lot of younger people is that social media can be really detrimental to mental health, because I feel like now your image on social media, your on-screen image is just so much more important than your real life persona. And that's like the biggest difference from when I was young to now, I think.
I think teenagers are chronically online, and there is this new thing which is called not wanting to be perceived, which is a very rampant thing now. Is that people, like these kids who are online, they have a completely separate online persona. It's almost like an avatar that you have online, and they live vicariously through those Instagram or Twitter profiles. And I think, of course, it will have consequences, good or bad. I mean, we're fairly new into it. I don't know what it means. Of course, it comes with, like he said, detrimental to mental health, but I feel also as human beings, we're extremely adaptable. I think I read a study where now, in fact, you can text and walk. Your brain has kind of like tuned you into like being able to walk on or cross the road while texting, because we're just, you know, as human beings, we evolve, we adapt. So I feel it'll be a while before we truly understand the effects of it, but yes, we're chronically online and we do not want to be perceived.
You know, you've, with class, opened up a series of conversations about these issues, which never happened before. Naina, when you read the script and you saw some of the scenes, it's not something that most Indian films or series talk about or delve into. Were you also scared that you'd end up also offending some sections of society, that you'd offend the conservative Indian?
First of all, when we got the show, and they were saying that it was an official adaptation of Elite. That is the first time that I engaged with Elite as a show. And when I saw it, I realized that actually this would be really such a strong piece of material to adapt to an Indian setting, because there's so much to talk about. You know, with the class divide, there's so much nuance that if done well and if handled by the right makers, it would actually be super impactful. And then when I saw Oshim Ahluwalia's name attached to it and I saw Netflix attached to it, there was a sense of, I don't know, in my gut, I just knew that it would do it. Of course, when you actually shoot the material and you know, you see things that are happening on social media with other projects, you know, there is of course a lot of anxiety and nerves with, okay, I hope that the message that we're trying to deliver so authentically and honestly is perceived correctly, as Moses said, the fear of perception or how we want to be perceived. But I think everybody came to this project with so much honesty and really trying to put a mirror without really trying to make a judgment. And because everybody, all the characters on the show are of different class backgrounds or whatever, there are different entry points for every viewer to come into the show. So you could come in through a Sabha, you could come in through a Dheeraj, you could come in through a Koyal, and you would have a completely different experience based on your life. So I kind of deviated from the question a little bit, but yeah, I was nervous. I think all of us were, but somewhere we felt that the content was made with the correct intention, and we're happy that it delivered.
So, you know, the thing about class is it talks about an issue that perhaps you see beyond education as well. In so many parts of our society, we look at that class divide, and many people also feel it in their daily lives. So while for you, you play a character who's from the other side of the tracks, right? And you're joining this really plush school, etc. How really did you train for such a character? Because you had to play that really rural Delhi boy. And add to that, do you ever feel that, you know, there was one experience that I extracted from to focus on the class divide that helped me understand that class divide?
Okay, first of all, thank you India Today for the opportunity, and thank you Netflix कि हमें यहाँ आने का मौका दिया. And I'm not from Delhi, I'm from Uttarakhand, I'm from Nainital. So for me it was hard क्योंकि दिल्ली का कैरेक्टर है, दिल्ली हरियाणा बेल्ट का कैरेक्टर है, एंड द एक्सेंट पार्ट वाज हार्ड, एंड यू नो द फिजिकलिटी वाज हार्ड, एंड द विटीनेस इज देयर कि दिल्ली हरियाणा में, इंडिया के अंदर हम लोगों में बहुत सारा विटीनेस है, हम लोग बहुत, यू नो, वी इंडियंस आर फन, तो बट वो हरियाणा का एक कैरेक्टर करने के लिए, बट वो नुआंस बहुत ज़रूरी है. आप लैंग्वेज को अच्छे से समझते हो, एक्सेंट को बहुत अच्छे से समझते हो. दैट वाज अ हार्ड पार्ट फॉर मी. At the same time, I was building like my physique and all for the role, so I used to like do 2-time training and all for that, and used to do accent classes, and I used to call my friend Haryana से कि क्या चल रहा है भाई, क्या कर रहा है आजकल के. तो basic, you know, we used to talk for like hours, and we did that, and also we were doing our intimacy work with Moses and Naina, and हम सब लोग काफ़ी nervous रहते थे क्योंकि it was our first show. एंड हम लोग सेट पे हम मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम ऑकवर्ड ही रहते थे. यू नो, वी यूज्ड टू डू लॉट ऑफ लाइक रिहर्सल बिफोर दैट, एंड मैं नैना से कहता था, नैना कैसे करेंगे सीन, लाइक वी डोंट नो हाउ टू लाइक डू दिस सीन. एंड लकीली हमारे डायरेक्टर काफ़ी अच्छे हैं, एंड नेटफ्लिक्स वी हैड लाइक आवर इंटीमेसी कोऑर्डिनेटर ऑन सेट, तो काफ़ी अच्छे से हम लोगों ने शूट किया, एंड वी वर वेरी कंफर्टेबल ऑन सेट. And we used to ask our director कि why you shooting this particular scene, like why Bali is like coming out like this, why he's with Koel like this particular character, like घंटों discussion चलता था. And about the class divide and see, I think character और मेरे में there's a similarity. It's about the hustle. I think I come from a small town, so for me it's like मैंने हसल किया हुआ हमेशा. मैं यू नो बिकॉज ऑफ द डिसिप्लिन कंसिस्टेंसी, आई हैव आर्मी बैकग्राउंड, सो आई थिंक इट्स इन माई DNA. सो लाइक उससे हमेशा मेहनत कर करके, लाइक आई हैव ओनली वन थिंग, हार्ड वर्क. उससे आई थिंक मैं आज आई एम सिटिंग हेयर.
But my sense is, when you know you're talking, is that you're completely opposite to Bali. Is that true?
Yeah.
completely different?
Yeah.
What was the first day on set like, Zed, for all of you? Was it really awkward when you all got together, met each other?
Our first day on set, we had, well, my first day on set would have been different to anyone else's, but it was literally because this is most of our first acting gig ever, so we've never seen cameras like that. There are 200 people around you watching, so my first 2-3 days on set were like horrible. They were just, I couldn't perform, we had to do so many takes, and I think it was just really nerve-wracking. But the coolest parts were workshops actually, because that's when we really got to bond and work on our characters and kind of become friends, because even bonding during the pandemic was super hard, right? Yeah. Because there are restrictions, we can't really meet outside of workshops, so I mean, yeah, first few days of set, it was nerve-wracking, but the times like the hooja party scenes and stuff, the days we were all there together, those were like the most fun days.
I just wanted to add to that, because we were all doing this for the first time. It was really nice because the first time we met was in workshops. And then as we progressed through the show, which was supposed to be shot over 3 months, but ended up being shot over 2 years, it became like an acting school where we would swap notes and document each other's growth and see, hey, this is what I was tackling when I was starting out, but I'm really good at this now. How are you feeling? How are the nerves? So that was really nice. And now to end this entire journey with the show coming out and doing so well, we're again swapping notes. What are we doing next? How do we tackle this environment? So it's been really just, it's been great to have 11 cast members to swap notes with. I don't think a lot of people get that. And to do this journey alone is so daunting with the stakes. So I'm really thankful for all of my cast members. Even today, to be here together is amazing.
How amazing. I can feel the chemistry of all of you, I think, when we were talking backstage as well. Chintan, tell us about your experience as well. You are a Guju boy who then came on board to play a boy from Jammu and Kashmir to talk about his struggles as well in merging and blending in society.
Yeah. So honestly, my struggles were very common. I was struggling with physics, chemistry, and maths in 11th, 12th. I was struggling with trigonometry, and differential calculus was still okay, but integral calculus, I still can't forget it. So honestly, I didn't have a lot of exposure to, let's say I was just in Rajkot for 18 years of my life. And then I shifted to Bombay, but I did theater for the entire time. My experience was the experience that I think related to the social media section. So I'll just ask a very simple question. What if something is not going right in your life? What do you guys do? Kya karte ho aap log? It's like, you solve the problem, right? If the problem is related to money or some sort of validation, you go and solve it. What do? Our generation, we post a picture, we get 10,000 likes and we are satisfied. That's what we do, seriously. So, yeah. And that's where I came, okay, this part is very interesting. There's a scene in the show where Yashika, who's played by Asha Kanga, she was trying to sort of Veer saab ka mood acha karne ki try kar rahi thi, and Veer riled up ke show this to ye bahu banna hai to mummy ji ke samne karna वगैरह वगैरह, and she started crying. Like she started crying. It was, I think, one of the worst moments of her life. But what she did next was directly took the pictures, she posted on social media, now she's great. So what happened exactly, okay? I think by staying around social media for a long time, I think we have, like, at least us as generations, have started thinking of that thing as a reality. And I have said it somewhere else also, I'll say it, कि I think social media में लोग जैसे है वैसे नहीं है. Social media में लोग वैसे है जैसे वो बनना चाहते हैं. And the gap between जो बनना चाहते हैं और जो है वो बहुत ज़्यादा है. And that is where I think I come in, because I have that experience. I have the experience because mostly when you study, when you are from a tier 2 city, what do you generally do? A, you study. B, you spend time on social media, or you watch Netflix, of course. Now there's class, so definitely you have to watch Netflix all the time, please. And so these are the three things I was with all the time. And this part specifically related to me the most because I myself do it. And I don't despise it, but I know it's not the solution, it's a solace. Yeah.
Very, very well said. Yeah. We've run out of time, but I just wanted to get a sense, Gurfati, if you can tell me, what can we expect really from season 2?
Oh, wow. We actually have no idea. It's too early right now. But, I mean, first, if everyone's not watched it, first, you guys should definitely watch season 1. But I think they're in writing, and season 2 will happen very soon. And I think it's safe to say that we're all very excited about it. It will be bigger, better, and
some crazy
more
stuff.
controversial, hopefully. And, more of bully twerking as well.
One final question before I wrap this up. I want you all to choose one character that you would have liked to play in class and why. Zain, start.
Balli. 1000%. I want to go twerk.
I think for me it would be Mr. Kalra, which is Koel Kalra's father.
Okay.
I think he's the Indian Gandolfini.
Nice. Cool.
I think I'd like to play Farooq.
Thank you, but I'm playing it,
I would
so
love
no.
to be poetic and like be, involved in the architecture and history of Delhi. Yeah, it would be lovely.
I think for me, I'd love to play Dhruv's character. He's a closeted
Because of me?
gay. Huh?
Because of me?
Because of you. We'll take that, bro. We'll take that.
Because of you. I said no. Veer.
What?
I think multi-layered character. I think he's a son. At the time lover. There's a masculine boy at the same time. Kind of a multiple layered character. So I want to play that kind of a character.
Okay, and finally, Chintan.
Honestly, me, man. Just Farooq, nobody else. I love my character. And I think this question was asked multiple times, but I've said all the time, just Farooq, nobody else. I love Farooq.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
thank you all so much for joining us here at the India Today Conclave. Can we have a big round of applause for them? And all the very best for season 2 of class.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. You were great on stage and on screen as well. But let me right now quickly, just before I let you guys go, just stay on the stage as I call upon Ravi Arya, Hindustan Power advisor, to come up on stage and present a small token of our appreciation to the star cast of class. Ladies and gentlemen, raise a warm applause. Thank you guys. Lots of luck for season 2. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's quickly move on to our last session before lunch. Give us about 10 seconds to turn around our stage and we're ready to go. Once again, on all the sessions that have taken place yesterday and today at the India Today Conclave in its 20th year with our theme, the India Moment. The highlights of that will be encapsulated in our next edition of the India Today magazine. So do remember to pick it up. Thank you, Prerna. That's hers. All right, let me introduce you to our next session, Bioswitches and Age Clocks, the jaw-dropping science of age and disease reversal. Research that makes lifespan just a number. This session is brought to you by RP Sanjeev Goenka Group. All right, before we get you this session and introduce you to our session's moderator, we also have a short film for you that looks into age reversal. Well, after our film, I suddenly see a lot of you suddenly perk up and pay a lot more attention. But to take you through our next session, let me invite on stage our session's moderator, Kali Puri, Vice Chairperson, the India Today Group.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're fast coming to an era where we will be celebrating our DNA age and not our birth age. Our birthdays will mean we get younger and not older. Imagine that. I have with me the handsome, miracle, almost 54-year-old doctor from Harvard Medical School who specialized in molecular genetics. He promises no aging, no wrinkles, no disease, and possibly choosing your own death date. Author of Lifespan and professor of genetics. Welcome. There are many beautiful people here today in the audience, but everyone likes a few tips, right? So, first of all, can you explain to the audience here what is the basic theory of reversing aging and bioswitches?
Well, thank you, Kali. Thank you for having me today. So the science of aging and aging reversal has come a long way in the past 20 years. When I started at Harvard Medical School, it was considered crazy to try and slow down aging, let alone reverse it. But the science is now at a point where we really do understand what drives aging, and also that there's a backup copy of youth in every one of our many trillions of cells that we've just recently learned how to access and reboot the body like you would reboot an old computer, and reinstate the youthfulness of tissues and organs and make them work again like they were young. And this is only a few years old now, but the technology is far beyond what I thought I would see in my lifetime, and it's only getting faster in its development.
So can you explain the basic theory, which is about keeping the body under a state of constant stress to activate the longevity genes? How does that work?
Yeah, you mentioned the bioswitches. What we discovered in my lab and in many labs around the world is that there are genes that control how long we live. Some of us are born with the best versions of those genes, and those people tend to live over 100. Those with parents, like the Prime Minister that lived over 100, tend to live also for a long time. But most of us are not born with the perfect set of genes, so we need to do a little extra. And what we've discovered is that how we live our life, what we eat, how much we move, the type of molecules that we ingest every day, how we sleep, how relaxed we are, how many friends we have, this modifies another type of system in the body that's called the epigenome. The epigenome is different from the genome. I think you all know that the genome is the DNA that we get from our parents. The epigenome is what controls the DNA, that tells a brain cell to be different from a liver cell, from a toenail producing cell. And over time, we lose those instructions. The epigenetic instructions become lost. And what we've found is that by living a healthy life, the kind of life that we'll talk about later, you can slow that rate of aging and prevent this corruption of the body's software and even reboot it.
So can we talk a little bit about this style of living? What are the things that we can do to slow that aging process down and activate these genes?
Yeah, well, there's some good and bad news. The good news is that aging is much easier to slow and reverse than we thought. The bad news is that what causes us to slow our aging process is to give our bodies a bit of a shock. In today's lifestyle, most of us have an abundance. Many of us, we have enough food, and we don't need to exercise. That's not the way we used to live, and it's not the way our bodies perform the best. By sitting for most of our lives and eating almost constantly, 3 meals a day for many of us, we end up turning off these body switches, and the body ages faster and faster. So we've built a world that's very comfortable, but the backlash is that we age faster. So what we've discovered in my lab, in studies in yeast cells that make bread and beer, in worms and flies and mice and monkeys and now humans, is that we want to put our bodies into a state of adversity, make the body feel a little bit uncomfortable. So how do we do that? Well, we can skip meals, we can exercise, we can eat food that is plucked from the ground when it's also stressed, because they have wonderful chemicals in them that make us healthier. And we can also get enough rest and calm down the sleep that leads to inflammation and other things like that. So really you want to make your body fearful of running out of food, or fearful that you're having to run away from a tiger. And that turns on the body's defenses against aging, we've learned. But that doesn't reverse aging so much. That requires a little bit more attention, which we've only recently figured out how to control.
So this business about skipping meals, just as we are having a session before lunch, can we talk a little bit about skipping meals? What do you recommend as a diet for slowing down the aging process?
There is a set of genes that I wrote about in my book, Lifespan, that's called the sirtuins, and they get turned on when there's not enough energy in the body. So if you don't have a lot of sugar in your bloodstream or a lot of protein, they will get turned on, and they defend the body against the damage that causes the aging process. And so what I've, over time, learned to do is to skip meals. I'm not always successful. Sometimes I have breakfast in in beautiful places. But for my goal is to not eat a large meal until dinner. And then I eat a very healthy vegan meal and very rarely alcohol. And this diet that I have gone on to for now about 18 months, my partner, Serena Poon, who's a nutritionist and a longevity expert as well, moved me from what I thought was a healthy diet, Mediterranean diet, with some red wine and cheese. I went completely to almost completely to plants. And my body has responded. I look better. I think my skin is better. I feel better. My memory is certainly better. But I think it's not just what you eat, it's also when you eat. And this constant eating, 3 meals a day plus snacks, is making us age faster than we need to.
So are you recommending intermittent fasting?
Well, the way we put it, Serena and I, is you want to eat within a certain window. And so I like to eat within a period of about 6 hours a day and not more. I can snack. Some snacks might be some sugar-free chocolate or some nuts or some avocado. It's not a crime to eat if you're a little bit hungry, but don't eat a big meal if you can until either late at night or have it in the morning, because you want to have a period where your body is not ingesting food and it will turn on its defenses against disease and aging.
See, can you talk a little bit about the fact when you went almost 20 hours without eating and you did that for a period of time?
Yeah, so 20 hours is a long time to go without food every day, but your body gets used to it. I found that after 2 weeks of doing that, I was not hungry anymore. If I felt a little bit hungry, I would drink a lot of tea. Serena and I have green tea matcha, which is filled with all these wonderful chemicals from stress plants, and drink a lot of water and tea. I think here in India, we know how to do that, and that is the solution. And we often think, oh, we need to feed the body the sugar, that, have a dessert, have some lollies. But really, your body can make its own sugar. Your liver makes sugar. You just need to wait 2 weeks for it to get used to it. Our liver is pretty lazy, but after 2 weeks it learns, in the morning I have to make some sugar. And what I found is that my liver making sugar is a lot smarter than my eyes and my mouth eating sugar. Because when we eat 3 meals, our sugar goes up and down, and we get lots of energy, then we crash and we get brain fog, and then we eat again and we're hungry, and you go like this through the day. When you don't eat until dinner, you're steady with your sugar because your liver knows what to do, and you can focus and just have a lot of energy.
So 1 meal a day, you would recommend that? And what would you recommend in that 1 meal?
Yeah, well, try to at least skip 1 meal a day. That would be my recommendation. And if you can do 2, even better. Some people go without food for 3 days. I've never been able to do that. I like food. But what's in the food? Well, as I mentioned, I went from drinking a lot of red wine because red wine actually, the component of red wine, resveratrol, was discovered in my lab to slow aging. So I thought, drink a lot of red wine, that's got to be healthy. But the new research just over the last 2 years says that drinking alcohol every day is really not good for you. So I've cut out alcohol and I've focused on plants. So this vegan diet has no dairy, which is very difficult here in India.
Yes.
But we do that. We substitute milk with coconut and nut-based milks and yogurts. They taste very good as well. And then so a typical dinner would be, plant-based meals that taste just or even better than what I used to eat. And I don't feel like I'm lacking anything. And you might ask, well, why would you do that? Well, there's a lot of science behind it. The protein that's in plants has a ratio of amino acids that stimulates these longevity genes, the sirtuins, and another one called mTOR. And if you always eat meat every meal, your body's just not fighting aging the way it could if you ate more plants.
So you are against meat in that sense?
Well, I love meat. I would love to eat meat. It tastes really good. It's just the science says plants give you better bang for the buck for longevity than meat. I mean, you can eat meat occasionally. Fish, for example, has a lot of great omega-3 fatty acids. So I'm not against meat. I just think try to focus more on plants if you can.
You said something about stressed vegetables. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is that versus, normal organic vegetables?
Yeah, so when farmers grow vegetables, they try to grow them as fast as possible. it's much more economical. The problem with that is that giving plants a lot of sunlight and water and fertilizer makes them very happy. And as I just told you, a happy organism is not a healthy organism. So when plants have a little bit of stress, so a little bit of lack of water, or there's a little bit of a caterpillar on there, or even not a lot of sun, in the case of green tea matcha, they put the plants in the shade, then those plants respond in a stress response. They turn on the production of chemicals called polyphenols. Resveratrol from red wine is a polyphenol that's produced when the plants get stressed. And it's my theory, which has a name, a terrible name, I apologize. It's called xenohormesis. Xeno means...
I was hoping you were not going to bring it up because of the terrible name.
Yeah, well, just remember, if your food is stressed, then you get the benefits. Stress your food so you don't have to. And so what we focus on, Serena and I, are plants that are full of color. Serena says, eat the rainbow. So try to eat bright red and purple, dark green, colored vegetables, because those are the ones that have these polyphenols that can turn on the body's defenses. And actually in my lab, if we give polyphenols to mice, they actually get healthier and run further like they've been exercising. So these little molecules, polyphenols, can actually not substitute, but can help you with your exercise and your otherwise healthy plant diet.
So in superstores, we're going to have inorganic, organic, and stressed vegetables now.
That's a great business plan. We should do that.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about sugar, because sugar is very addictive, and it's a real pick-me-up. So is there a healthy way to have sugar?
Depends on the sugar. If you're talking about cane sugar, sucrose, I would try to limit that as much as possible, unfortunately. I gave up eating desserts in my 40s, though I do steal it from people at the table. So Serena orders the desserts for me. But really, sugar is something that is known to be toxic in the long run. It's sucrose, which forms glucose, will attach to your body's components. Your proteins will become what's called glycated, and that's known to drive aging as well. So that's why we try to not eat too much, and so we don't want to eat a lot of sugar. But there are substitutes. There's, for example, monk fruit produces sugar, which Serena has told me to try, and it tastes just as good as sugar, and it doesn't give you that spike, and that should be good for longevity.
What about stevia, maple syrup, honey, coconut sugar?
They're all on a various scale. Honey is not so good in large amounts. Stevia, I think, is okay, but it's all on a scale. I think the best is allulose or monk fruit, and then a bit above that, a bit worse than that is stevia. But at the bad end is glucose, sucrose, and honey. But honey has a lot of goodness in it, so I wouldn't say avoid honey, just don't eat too much of it.
How would you classify sugar in fruit? Like, would that be something you would try and replace desserts with? Like at the end of a meal, would you just have a piece of fruit?
Yeah, for sure, fruit is good. I would avoid fruit juices unless they're from fruits that don't have a lot of sugar, but oranges and apples and pineapple have a lot of sugar that I generally avoid.
Okay. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your vitality pills. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the vitality pills and what we can do to make ourselves, eternally young and beautiful?
Yeah. So I've been taking supplements and experimenting on myself for about 20 years. And my father has also been doing it. He's now 83 and in perfect health. And what I learned through my research and through my own self-experimentation and then clinical trials in hospitals is that there's certain molecules mostly from plants that provide the benefits of fasting and exercise as well. And so I was taking these separately. I take a variety of them. Do you want me to go into which ones?
Yes, I mean, don't go into the details, but we would all like to know where these pills are available and what's in them. I'm sure everyone's thinking, where can I get the prescription?
All right. So if you don't have a pen, you can go to my book, and I wrote these chemicals, these supplements down in my book. In the English version, it's page 304. And there are three main things that I take and have taken for over a decade. The one chemical that I take every day is resveratrol, which is the red wine chemical. And that comes from grapes. And so that one gets sprinkled into some yogurt in the morning. I also take a molecule.
That's the one which red wine has, right? But it's the amount you take is equivalent to 750 glasses of red wine per day.
I don't recommend getting it from red wine. So the other molecule is called NMN, not to be confused with M&Ms. Don't mix those up. NMN is a version of vitamin B3 that makes a chemical in the body that we need for life, and that's called NAD. And as we get older, we make less and less of this. And without NAD, these sirtuins that we discovered, slow aging, remember the genes that we discovered? Mm-hmm. They don't work without a lot of NAD. So as we get older, our defenses decline. And so by taking this supplement, we know that it doubles the levels of NAD back to when I was age 20. And there's now clinical trials that my colleagues at Harvard have done that says that NMN has some health benefits in early studies, such as lowering cholesterol and blood pressure. And so I take that one every day as well. I take a half a gram of that currently. And then the third one is metformin. Metformin is a little bit more controversial because it's a drug. And it's just classified as a drug. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily dangerous. In fact, it's one of the world's safest drugs. It's used for type 2 diabetes to control blood sugar. And what's been found is that people who take metformin tend to live a lot longer. Even those who don't have type 2 diabetes, there's evidence that they are protected against cardiovascular disease and frailty, and even Alzheimer's disease. And so what I do is I take metformin even though I don't yet have type 2 diabetes.
So metformin, is it a form of this GLP-1 receptor blockers, the skinny pen, Ozempic, which all of Hollywood is apparently on? And they're getting thinner and thinner if you see the red carpet at Oscars. Is that what it is? A form of that?
Well, no, it's actually very different. Metformin will activate your body's energy production and boost mitochondria, which are the little energy packs in your cells. So that's a healthy way to do it. I won't say the brand name, but yeah, these GLP-1 agonists are causing your body to become more insulin sensitive and take up the sugar from your blood and burn fat. And people who take this drug, they do lose weight. The drug is designed to treat type 2 diabetes, and it's actually a blockbuster, very effective drug. One of my colleagues over in New York, Nir Barzilai, says that in his practice, he essentially now thinks of type 2 diabetes as a curable disease, only in the last few years because of these new drugs. But people who don't have obesity or diabetes are taking it, or they might have obesity, but they certainly don't have type 2 diabetes and they lose weight. The one negative side effect that everyone should be aware of is that people can lose too much fat in the wrong place, including in the face, where you don't want to lose it, especially if you're older. And you can tell if somebody's taking this medicine because they start to look far too thin.
It's called the brand name face, right? I'm not taking the brand name either, but that's what it's called.
Yeah, it is. So you have to be very careful. I would say it's much better to eat less often and exercise, and you'll get much bigger health benefits than taking that drug.
Let's talk a little bit about exercise. What kind of exercise are you recommending? Like a lot of interval training, running, strength, yoga?
Yeah, well, yoga is very important, I think, here in India.
Are you just saying that because Serena is sitting opposite us, or?
Yeah, Serena's down there, below the stage here.